Now anyone can learn and improve their chess skills with the world champion, Magnus Carlsen. The Magnus Trainer app is packed with fun mini-games and interactive training content, playable anytime, anywhere. Get the Magnus Trainer, available in the App Store and Google Play.
If you're a chess player, you have plenty of opportunities to challenge and play online against the top players participating in the Chessable Masters Super Tournament. Don't miss the opportunity to learn from the best. Check out the Chess24 shows area and tune in for banter blitzes with the likes of Magnus Carlsen, Fabiano Caruana, Alexander Krischuk, and Pentala Harikrishna. Go premium at Chess24 to challenge them and gain full access to the world's most entertaining chess platform.
Whoa, I think he's getting
Yes.
mated now.
G4, G3, right?
Yeah,
Right.
he just...
Ooh.
How did we get here? So after rook bishop a1, Ding played rook f8, picking up that tempo with c3, rook f1, bishop b2, bishop d1, and here Hikaru played a natural enough move.
dare I say, congratulations on the 7 draws?
Well, I'm not accepting your congratulations. I want congratulations on match victory. I'm not accepting the.
Hello everyone, and welcome to my very first course for Chessable.
It's time to take control of your journey towards chess mastery. Magnus Carlsen introduces Chessable, the definitive solution for studying chess. Move Trainer uses the science of spaced repetition to identify your strengths and eliminate your weaknesses. There's no need to set up a board, remember which page you're on, or keep track of all the moves you miss. Move Trainer empowers you to go from the opening to the end game with confidence. It's a seamless, effective, and fun way to study chess. Choose from one of the largest online chess libraries in the world, with hundreds of titles ranging from classic books through to our exclusive Chessable courses, including over 100 free courses. Get expert insights from International Master John Bartholomew, Grandmaster Sam Shankland, International Master Christoph Sulecki, Grandmaster Simon Williams, World Champion Magnus Carlsen, and hundreds of other instructors. Get started now and join our growing community of over 100,000 chess enthusiasts at chessable.com. Chessable, take control of your journey towards chess mastery.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. A big welcome to each and every one of you. We are ready for day 3 of the Chessable Masters quarterfinals. I am your host, Yasser Seirawan, and our host of social media is Anna Rudolf, and Grandmaster Extraordinaire Peter Svidler will be bringing you all the action, breaking it down move by move. First of all, a big welcome to you both. And Anna, what's trending?
Welcome, everybody, and thank you once again, Yasser, as usual, for the kind welcoming word. I will be monitoring the 3 chats on Twitch, YouTube, as well as on Chess24. Huge welcome to all of you tuning in to another quarterfinals day. What is trending, I'm soon revealing, but before that, let me also say hi to the one and only Grandmaster Peter Svidler. Peter, how are you feeling today?
Hi, and hi, Anna. Hi, Yasser. Well, exciting day. Feeling all right, even though, yeah, it's becoming a bit of a moot point. But
is it?
but no, I mean, with this weather, I would like to for there to be a sea next to me, not not just my four walls of the flat.
I can understand that, although it's raining today in Ireland, so I may be envying the weather in Russia right now. Since Yasser asked me about what's trending on social, let me bring up some of the tweets that were the most popular topic on social media with the hashtag #StudyChess. Of course, one of them includes the match between Ding Liren and Hikaru Nakamura, and even Howard Staunton, one of the strongest players of the 19th century, tweeted about the play of Ding Liren, saying the Chinese champion of the checkered field deserves the highest compliments for the excellent manner in which he has conducted this match. Praising Ding Liren's win over Hikaru Nakamura, the American star will need to bounce back tomorrow if he wants to make it to a tiebreaker on the third day of the quarterfinals. But other than the match between Ding and Hikaru, the hot topic, of course, was the 7 draws between Giri and Grishchuk, starting with the moment where Magnus tweeted about the second game where Anish had a winning position in an endgame against Grishchuk, a pawn-up minor piece endgame, and he spoiled it. Magnus tweeted, "My boy Anish Giri snarking a draw from the jaws of victory," to which Anish responded right after the rapid games, "El Magneto," repeating this old joke for all the new followers he gathered after his last match with GM Hikaru. Anyway, enjoy the Blitz, guys. So that was Anish tweeting, still in the competition right before the Blitz game started, and Magnus responded to Anish, "No joke, just a public announcement. Good luck." Now, after the first 4 draws in Rapid, 2 more draws followed in the Blitz, which made the world champion tweet again about which color will Anish choose. And Magnus's poll was the following: did Giri choose black in Armageddon? Yes, or what else? Now, after it was a draw in Armageddon 2, the second of Magnus calls, and Peter Heine took it to Twitter saying, "There's a story in Donner's excellent book, The King. A player accidentally fell entering the stage, and while it could have happened to anybody, all participants would have guessed it would happen to Deemer. Winning a match by 7 draws could happen to anybody, but ... So there has been a lot of trolling about the 7 draws. Unfortunately for Anish, a lot of old memes have been also circling on Twitter, but he himself responded by saying on Twitter the following, if we can bring up Anish's tweet as the next clip: "Won without winning, but still didn't win," referring to our typo on Instagram, which said that Grishchuk won the match. And then he followed with, "Looking forward to another epic battle the day after tomorrow. In the meantime, do follow me on Instagram for more insights on the ongoing battle between me and El Magneto's Corp Chess24. We will soon bring up Anish's Instagram series since he's recommending it to the viewers." And on that note, Yasser, what is your thoughts? What is your opinion on yesterday's Giri Grishchuk match? And do you think there's a curse of draws in the case of Anish?
Well, thank you for that, Anna. It seems like there was some very, very good poking going on there. Let's call it friendly banter between the players. Of course, Anish, because of his candidates tournament where he did draw all of his games, has got this reputation for drawing. But I got to tell you something, Anna. I don't think it's a problem to begin with. And I'll say, put anybody in this field of players of the Chessable Masters, and if you can draw your games, you're a great player, because these are some elite players. Drawing is an art, and it's hard. And you have black against Magnus Carlsen, you'll be very, very satisfied, I assure you, if you make a draw. But let's set the table for today. Today, of course, we are in day 3 of the quarterfinals of this $150,000 Chessable Masters tournament. It's the 3rd leg of 4 qualifying events that will get each winner to the grand finals of the Magnus Carlsen Tour. The Magnus Carlsen Tour is a $1 million affair. The grand finals will have $300,000 in prizes. The players in these quarterfinals who do leave our event will be leaving with $8,000 in the pocket, and they will try to get into the semifinals where they could earn a lot more money. All the games will be played at a time control of 15 minutes for each player. That's what they begin with. But for each and every move that they make, they will get a 10-second bonus. If after 4 games the match remains tied at 2-2. Then the players will play a pair of blitz games of 5 minutes plus 3 seconds per game. If the match is still tied, then they will play one Armageddon. So we can consider all the games played today as a set of games. The players need to win 2 out of 3 days. Today we are in matches A and B. They will rejoin after day 1. Magnus and Nepo lead their matches. In other words, if Magnus and Nepo win today, they are the semifinalists. And to call the matches as he sees them, I'm going to turn it over to Peter and ask Peter the salient question. How do the players who are trailing in their matches get back into them? Peter.
Well, luckily for those who have lost day 1, this format means that today they start from a blank slate. They don't really. Day 1 is now firmly in the past. It no longer has any relevance to what's happening today, and you just need to play better than your opponent on the day. The scores are 0-0, and there's everything to play for. Obviously, beating Magnus on demand is not an easy task. For instance, in case of Fabi, and Vladislav Artemiev, I think, also would have felt quite hard done by the events of day 1, where he lost game 1 by disconnecting in severe time trouble. And it wasn't specifically the disconnect, but the fact that he could not reconnect in time while his clock was still ticking, that ended up costing him the game. Such things are quite clearly quite unpleasant to face, and I'm sure he would not have enjoyed any part of it. But I think Artemiev is an extremely confident young man, and he will feel that, barring unfortunate accidents, he is not really a dog against anybody in the world. But I don't think if there is a specific piece of advice I would give somebody who lost the first set. Just play well, hope your preparation pays off. And for myself, I always repeat as a kind of a mantra, very important to have a fresh head. Just, don't overload yourself with variations. Don't try to guess what will happen in terms of openings. Just approach it with as freshly as you can, and trust in your obviously huge innate ability and your intuition and your understanding of chess in general.
I think that is fantastic advice, and I can't express it enough that for everybody who goes and plays in the chess tournament, a fresh head, if you're coming to the board and you're cluttered with all kinds of thoughts, and you're worried about your car or how you parked it or you did something wrong, I mean, really take the time to take a deep breath and settle down. Fresh head, it's just so vital, and being practical. But Anna, when we brought it to you, you didn't answer at least the most salient question that I would have for you. Anna, what's our question of the day?
That's a very important question indeed, Yasser, since every day we have a different, unique question to our dear viewers. And if you are the tweeter, the chosen tweet, you will receive today's course. We will soon reveal who will be the author of the day and which course you can win. But for now, let's bring on today's question, which is the following. Is using an engine, AI, to study chess good for your chess? And please also explain why you think yes or no. And if you use engine, how would you recommend using it? So elaborate on this topic. Is using an engine or AI good for studying chess? Use the hashtag #StudyChess on Twitter if you would like to interact with us and answer today's question. Yesterday's winner, let me also show yesterday's winning tweet, was Adam Genesis Art. He has been blessing us with fan art, and he also answered yesterday's question by choosing Ding Liren as his Banter Blitz opponent. Now we will I think, in this very moment, reveal the author of the day. I thought maybe we'll wait a little bit, but no, let me announce today's author, who will be joining us shortly, well, in an hour or so, is Grandmaster Erwin Lamy, longtime second of Anish Giri, and he will be here to talk about his opening lab, the Dubov Terrash, which today is on sale. So the course that you can win today is Erwin's the Dubov Terrash, and he answered to a very similar question about using engine when studying chess. If we can bring up his answer in an interview he has given, what is the most overrated advice? And he said, what do you think is the most overrated piece of advice you hear, and why? Don't use a computer, he thinks, is the most overrated piece. And he also added, you simply have a sparring partner rated 3,700 at your fingertips. So there you have it. That's Erwin's answer also to our question of the day. But we are curious about your thoughts on this topic. Do you use engine when studying chess? How do you use it? What do you think is the best way to handle it? Or if you think that it's not a good idea, do let us know why by using the hashtag #StudyChess. Now back to Yasser and what's at stake today.
Absolutely, and it sounds to me like Erwin should win the prize and win his own course. So that was,
I'm sure
that was
he
a
would
very
be
good
thrilled.
answer. I mean, that was a great answer. I mean, let's face it. Just a quick reminder of what we're trying to do in these broadcasts is to make them more fun, more educational, a little bit more interactive. And that is why Anna is monitoring all the social media channels so that you can, in fact, channel questions to our panel, to our special guest that we do have on the show. We make an attempt after the games are over to invite the players to share their thoughts. And usually we invite the winners of the day. So get your questions ready for Anna, and she will find the questions that she likes best. Again, we're doing our best to make these broadcasts as fun as possible. Also, before I turn it over to Peter with a very big question that I have for him, I just wanted to say a big shout out to Soteris and Lewis. These are gentlemen who are working behind the scenes to make this broadcast possible. And when everything goes swimmingly, it's wonderful. But yesterday we had some real challenges, and they were super pros. So a little love in the chat to those two fine gentlemen who made the broadcast possible. The question I had for you, Peter, is to drill down a little bit in the matches today and talk a little bit about the openings that we can expect from these four great chess players.
Well, it's easy, I think, to talk about the Caruana-Carlsen match in that respect, because clearly they have played a great deal of chess against each other. And on day one, it was only the three games. The first one was a Queen's Gambit with a bit of a sideline, which gained some traction recently. I don't know if that will be necessarily repeated again. And then there was an Italian with Fabio on the white side. And as for the opening in game three, I think that's probably unlikely to happen again, because by that point, Fabio was trailing 2-0 and had to take perhaps more risks than he normally would be comfortable with. But they do have, as everybody understands, they have a tremendous history of playing against each other, and you can see some trending topics. It does appear as if Magnus is quite interested in the idea of playing the Sicilian against Fabio. I think ever since their match for the World Championship in 2018, Magnus has been doing that more and more. And on the white side, Magnus does seem to play 1d4 more than anything else against Fabio, with some English mixed in. We haven't seen that 2 days ago, but the match just generally went so comfortably for Magnus that perhaps he didn't feel he needed to deviate from what he feels is the optimal opening approach. As for the All Russian Derby, I think Artemiev is a very difficult player to predict in terms of openings. He has quite a varied repertoire, and he also can sprinkle in pretty much anything, in particular if he feels the match situation demands it, such as the e4, c5, knight f3, a6 that he sprung on Jan in game 3, and actually got a very playable position out of the opening there before committing a very uncharacteristic blunder and losing that game as well. All in all, slightly easier to predict the general tone of the opening, let's put it like this, in the Carlsen Caruana match, and I really wouldn't want to, bet any money on even the first moves in the game. In the games between the two young Russians.
Well, thank you for that, Peter. It's always fun, no matter what sport you're in, when number one versus a number two go at it. So that marquee matchup we'll certainly keep our eyes on. But back over to you, Anna, and the question is, what's trending?
I can't wait to see the world number one versus world number two, of course, but I did promise to show you some of the Instagram posts that you can find on Anish Giri's social media, since he was recommending everyone to follow him on IG. So here's some IG feed by Anish Giri. You can also always get to know about what he's having for breakfast, for lunch, constant Foodstagram updates, and polls. The next slide is a poll related to our broadcast, and I'm going to ask Yasser and Peter later on to answer the question. If we can show the next slide from Anish Giri's Instagram. This was a tweet by Eric asking what happened here in your first game. If you guys see the reaction of Anish and Sasha at the same time. And Anish made a poll where the guesses are the following. A, suddenly heard Yazenko commentating. B, El Magneto the frog appeared on the Chess24 screen. C, Svidler started drawing arrows on our board. Or D, we saw the 46% discount ad and found it outrageous. So if you are not following Anish Giri on Instagram, you are missing out on content like this, high quality content. We will address the poll later on, but now moving on to what's the pairings for today. William Morsch has a fan art showing the two pairs who will be competing today in the quarterfinals. It is indeed Carlsen versus Caruana and Nepomniachtchi versus Artemiev, both Caruana and Artemiev in a must-win situation in terms of today's set. And the final one is a bit of behind-the-scenes information from Jan Nepomniachtchi, who played Banter Blitz yesterday on Chess24 and revealed that in his game against Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, he had trouble not only on the chessboard, but also outside the board, saying that he was too busy fighting for his life against some mosquitoes that appeared in the room. So behind the scenes information, hoping that there will be no mosquitoes involved in today's match against Artemiev. But now back to Yasser and Peter. Yasser, what did you think of Anish's poll, and what do you think is the correct answer?
I need more time. I need more time.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Peter.
I would like for you to repeat the question, please, as they say on online quiz shows. But I'm always. I think Svidler drawing arrows is the answer to everything, pretty much. So, like whatever the question is, this has to be the correct answer. So.
We are very proud of you, Peter, for your arrows.
I appreciate the vote of confidence.
The arrows inspire us all. I just also like to make a quick shout out as we're getting ready for the start of the quarterfinals to Chess24, our co-hosting this event. There are many streams in many languages, and for me, it's just fantastic, this technology. So if you want to study chess in Russian or French or German or even Chinese, Mandarin, please check out the other broadcasters and presenters on Chess24. And of course, today, once again, we're going to have Grandmaster Erwin La'Ami. I've known Erwin since he was really, really young. used to come over and we do a little trainings together. A wonderful young gentleman. He is a Chessable author, and his course is having an incredibly huge discount. So we'll look forward to welcoming Erwin and getting him in the mix and throwing the patties, as we say, as the moves, I think, are kind of getting ready to get underway. Just a few minutes away, I believe, from the start of this day 2 of the matches A and B. And again, you need to win 2 out of the 3 days. We'll see if Fabi and Vladislav can tie the matches up. Peter, any final thoughts as we're getting ready to go?
No, I really would like to see at least the first moves in those games before I commit to any more punditry. Honestly, it's a little bit too difficult to predict the in-depth things about the openings in rapid and blitz events, because people do take a lot more liberties in general. They do feel like it's less important to be entirely correct in your approach, so to speak. You can definitely take some more risks with this shorter time controls.
Well, it's funny because when I think about players taking liberties, it seems to me that Magnus has been the one who's kind of, well, especially in the openings, doing funky things. The Alekhine kind is not a funky thing per se, but I'm just using that as an example that he's one to welcome going off the beaten path, so to speak, very early. With this lead, do you think he'll be doing anything extra funky?
Not at the beginning, I think. I think game 1 week, I would expect him to play what amounts to his normal repertoire, and I'm pretty sure he would like to put the match entirely to bed today. He doesn't want a day 3 for all kinds of reasons. It's obviously very nice to have an additional rest day to just recuperate, play some more of that wonderful basketball that he's so famous for. And of course the memories of the Lindore Sabi semifinal, even though it was against a different opponent, are probably still quite fresh. And after a very commanding performance in the first set, he ended up not getting to the finals after a spirited comeback by Hikaru Nakamura. But in terms of an opening approach and sort of general approach, I think he respects Fabi a little bit too much to do anything silly in the opening, at least in the early going.
All right, and just to remind everyone what Peter is talking about there, Hikaru Nakamura lost day 1, 3-zip to his opponent Magnus. Squeaked by, Hikaru squeaked by in day 2, forced the day 3 tiebreaker, and Hikaru won that. So the fact that Fabi trails 2.5 half is not the case. He's just trailing by 1 day. If he wins the sets of games today, well, the match is tied. And they're off, Peter. 1d4 by Fabi.
Indeed, and Magnus is, although we see him on his screen, apparently deep in thought as to how to reply to this outrageous beginning. So we'll take this moment to take a look at the game in which we have more than one ply on the board. And Artemiev goes for the trump in this particular game, which is an interesting option. These days, unfortunately, I think you cannot really expect people to be unprepared for the trump. It's very much become part of the mainstream opening discussion. You no longer really get raised eyebrows if you play the trump, even at the very top level. Mm-hmm. Magnus played it in the World Championship match, and it's generally been played at the very, very elite levels by many players. And Jan goes for one of the more principled lines, I feel, d4, knight f6, bishop g5, the immediate d5, e3, c5, which is, I think, one of the more direct ways of trying to equalize on the spot against the Trompowski. Takes c4 is what Artemiev chose. D takes c4, bishop takes c4. I'm curious to see if after c takes d4, his intention is maybe to play knight f3, but that's probably a little bit too adventurous, right? He probably doesn't need
setting
to do
a
that.
nasty little trap there.
Yeah, but
yeah.
Unfortunately, you can't really expect Jan to blunder that, and also knight f3 does allow queen a5 check, and you may never win that pawn back again after, let's say, knight bd2, ge3, fe3, and e6. I'm not sure I can prove this is enough compensation for the sacrificed pawn.
Exactly.
So I suspect after cd4 there's really nothing wrong with just recapturing back. But generally speaking, I think this is quite an attractive position for white in a match situation where you need to play for a win, because it's quite unbalanced and also objectively looks like it might be quite good for white after something along the lines of knight c6, knight f3, and I don't know about bishop g4, but if black develops normally, I don't know. Yes, what would you say is the normal development here? e6, bishop e7, or g6? Probably bishop g7 and castles, I guess.
Yeah, probably bishop g7 and castles. I just want to point out an old favorite trap of mine. For those of you who don't know that, it goes bishop g4 in that moment after knight c6, knight f3. I mean, I think everybody should be familiar with this one. d5, knight e5, double question mark. Knight takes e5. Whoopsie daisy! Didn't I just win your queen?
It's slightly unfair for me to point this out to you here, but in this particular case, this doesn't lose because of queen a5 check. But the theme is actually very important. I appreciate you mentioning this, because perhaps some of our viewers aren't familiar with this tactic, and of course the tactical motif Yasser was describing is this: bishop takes d1, bishop d5. And because of how strong the knight on e5 is and how few squares black has, you end up losing a lot of material here.
Exactly. You have to.
But importance of calculating intermediate moves is also something that you should all be paying attention to. And in this particular position, queen a5 check, I think, means that black gets a very playable position.
Exactly. And just to complete the thought, now that you've played queen a5 check, after a move like knight c3,
you can actually, I was calculating, you can actually do that, I think.
Yeah.
Bishop d1, bishop d5 check, and game actually continues. It might be playable for white for all we know.
I know, it is pretty
which is
funny.
quite remarkable.
Right, king d8, knight takes f7 check.
Yeah,
and the game rages on. I mean,
absolutely, yeah. It's an unclear position, but we're getting a little bit too carried away, and some moves have come in.
Right.
In fact, the knight has not been developed to f3. It's been developed to e2 after bishop g7, knight c3, knight c6. Vladislav preferred knight g2, castles, bishop g4,
right.
And he has just played d4, d5 in this position. Not entirely sure what I think about any of this. It's a very unusual structure. I don't think I've seen this structure very much at all from any of the openings I've ever looked at in my life.
Well,
it
turns out that actually this is one of my very favorite structures as black. It comes from a Bronstein Caro-Kann, where you take on e4 on move 3 and go knight f6. The guy takes on f6, and I recapture with the G pawn, and I get this kind of, yes, thank you, Peter, for putting this up. I've always associated this particular line with Bent Larsen and David Bronstein. I hope I'm giving them the proper credit. And I try to do things like, I don't know, bishop f5 and bishop g6 and bishop g7. As I mentioned many, many times, all I want is a safe king. Well, that's
I appreciate that, but what I meant is not the kingside structure, but specifically this kingside structure in conjunction with there not being anything on the c file and the white pawn on g5. That particular constellation of pawns, I don't quite know what to think of. I do like Jan playing bishop g4 early on, because as you mentioned, if that bishop gets transferred over to g6 and then somehow doesn't get picked up by 4 or 5, which is quite relevant.
Exactly.
It's a nice square because it covers some of the slight weaknesses black might have on the king side there.
Right. And then you say to yourself, well, what's happening to that dark square bishop? It might poke its head out on h6. It's kind of ironic, Peter, that we had Camille on our show twice as a special guest. And, the moment that Trompowsky appears on the board, the very chessable course that he did on, where's Camille when you need him? But okay, you mentioned you felt that Vladislav will be satisfied because of the
I think it's just a very playable
nature.
position.
Yeah. And there's play for both sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if white is better. I suspect probably not objectively, but I don't think he would necessarily care about that at all, because it's a sharp position. Black really has no defined way to simplify it.
Right.
And there's a lot of play left, which is, I think, something that Vladislav in particular likes to get out of the opening with the white pieces. I think he is very much in the camp of people who aren't really greatly invested in the idea of quote unquote getting an advantage and being better after the opening. He feels that he is a very strong player, and as long as he gets to play chess, as long as this doesn't devolve into a memory competition with some kind of a forced outcome available to black, I think he feels very comfortable in those situations. But we've been completely ignoring.
Yeah, I was about to say, and have we gone past one ply?
We have gone. We have gone
number one and number two.
Yeah, we have gone past one ply, and they are discussing what I think is clearly becoming, to my great surprise originally, but I've come to have peace with it by now. That e3 and then bishop d2 is more or less a mainline reply to the Nimzo these days. When I first realized this was happening, it felt bizarre to me, honestly. I couldn't really believe this is what I was watching.
Agreed.
But then I had occasion to look at some of it myself and also speak to people who have been doing this consistently. And as mentioned, I am much less outraged now. And Magnus goes for d5, knight of 3, b6, which is definitely one of the more concrete ways to reply to this system. Fabi trades the pawns, goes bishop d3. Black occasionally goes for some c5 type positions here, but Magnus plays something else. He goes bishop a6, which I think is a plan which generally is good on positional grounds in any kind of Nimzos. But it does misplace your pieces a little bit. The idea of trading the very nice bishop on d3 for the bishop on c8 is quite healthy, but you do then have to put your knight on a6 and also the queen on c8, because you don't really want to be trading on c3 just yet. That's probably not ideal, but you do get an important pair of bishops off the board. And the game continued rook c1, rook e8, castles, bishop f8, knight e2, and Magnus played c7, c5 here.
Well, again, it feels like Fabi's going to be a little bit happy because he's got an unbalanced game and dynamic things that could happen. Again, Fabi's in a situation he has to win today. He has to win on demand, not this game, but just the complete sets of game to tie up the match. I'm going to interrupt you, Peter, and just ask Anna, what's trending?
I wanted to bring back Magnus Carlsen's tweet, Yasser, since you were talking about what happened at the Lindorus Abbey, the second leg of the Magnus Carlsen chess tour, where Magnus won 3-0 on the first day in his match against Hikaru Nakamura, and then went on to lose the semifinals against Hikaru. So he reminded himself with the following tweet: "Don't make the mistake of relaxing too early again," he said in a relaxed manner, tweeting this after he won the first set in the quarterfinals now against Fabiano. So as you said, very much likely that Magnus would like to win today's set and then have a free day instead of having to play on a third day as well. But he himself is aware that he cannot fall into the same mistake as what happened to him against Hikaru. And on that note, let me remind everybody that we do have a question of the day, so that you can win today's course by Erwin Lamy. If we can bring up the question again: are chess engines or AI useful for studying chess? Use the hashtag #StudyChess if you would like to interact with us and answer this question. Please also explain if you say yes or no, why, and if you use the engines, how do you think the best way is to use it for studying chess? I'd like to give a shout out to all of you tuning in on Twitch, YouTube, and Chess24. Thousands of you tuning in every single day. It's a thrill to have you, and the interaction in the live chats is absolutely a blast. I keep an eye on all 3 chats, and on that note, I will now head back to my behind the scenes spot, looking at the chat and social media and giving back the voice to Yasser and Peter to know what's going on here with that isolated pawn structure between Caruana and Carlsen.
All right, Anna, thank you very much for that. I was just going to say that we're going to have to give 2 prizes because I think Erwin already won his course by answering the question of the day. But back to you, Peter. After takes on c5, knight takes c5, white's queen. Not the greatest choice of squares. Fabi chose c2, and no. Well, I want to say. You've got to do something with this bishop on d2. You were alluding to it very early in your explanation of this opening, that the bishop on d2 isn't too happy, but maybe it's very happy right now. Peter.
It's becoming happier, but black has very good piece play right now because the queen on a6 is surprisingly active, keeping a constant eye on this knight on e2. And after a3, rook ac8, white would like to be able to play something along the lines of bishop d4 and then perhaps knight f4 and start attacking the pawn on d5. But as things are, bishop d4 already invites something like knight e6. And it becomes, I think, genuinely awkward for white to make... Why am I saying knight e6? I mean, knight d3 wins material on the spot.
Exactly.
There's a bigger threat here. And also relevantly, if white decides to go for something like rook f d1, I think you have to worry. I don't know if worry is the right word, but you definitely have to calculate knight a4.
and continuing the line, or rook takes d5.
Rook takes d5, we just take on c3 twice, and we take on a3. And as long as we don't get mated on the king side somehow after knight g5, g6,
I have for you. Yes,
but I don't think we do get mated. And here, if black stabilizes, if there's nothing really bad happening to black on the king side, endgames start looking quite rosy, honestly, because this pair is quite strong, and this does start looking like some kind of a very, very nice Grunfeld endgame, which is obviously very dear to my heart.
I was just being told that this exact line we're looking at is from Christoph Solecki's Chessable course as well, which is really remarkable. I mean, we've had these chess authors on the show, and then suddenly they're playing the variations. Peter,
up until which moment? I'm very curious.
Yeah, this whole bishop d2 complex, this Rubinstein bishop d2, is in the Chessable course. Where it stops, I'm not really too sure. Peter, I was finding that same position fascinating because of that sudden light square barrage with the rook was on d5. And
in fact, they are progressing along this path. But Fabi chose to play rook cd1, not rook fd1. So we have the similar position with the rook on f1 instead of c1.
Okay, very interesting. And assuming we were to go around down that rose petal path, and it almost feels like you want to just go knight g5 and rook d7, or some kind of a combination.
Yeah, but then after rook e7, I think it fizzles. That's the problem. It does look attractive for a second, but then I couldn't find any way to really create anything tangible here.
Well, especially I'm staring at a back rank mate, by the way.
Exactly, yeah.
So, I mean, it really feels like I can't play rook d1 and get on with the business because, oops, I've got issues myself. Okay. So, if we can't do this, do we have to play a move like c3, c4?
I have a feeling you might have to, but then once you start giving black tempi to
Yeah.
to stabilize. I think it does become an exercise in damage limitation more than anything else. White probably isn't doing so poorly, but black is also completely fine. And we are all the way up to queen takes a3 on the live board as well, which is not unexpected, frankly. It did seem like it was quite likely to happen. And c4 played by Fabi.
Yeah, it's really a pity that you didn't have enough oomph of a follow-up. Funny that I mean, would it have made a difference if Fabi had kept the rook on C? The rook on F1 is not contributing. That's clear.
I'm curious why he chose rook CD1 there. What could have bothered him so much after rook FD1 that he chose not to play it? I'm not entirely sure. There is the move knight b3, but I don't think it's that great because I think we can go rook b1. And also queen takes b3, queen takes e2, and bishop e1 appears to be not bad at all. So currently I'm a little bit mystified by that choice, but there must have been a reason.
All right, fair enough. And Peter, let's have a look at the other quarterfinals, if you will.
Sure.
Here.
After bishop b3, Jan played rook c8, h3, bishop d7. Artemiev quite logically put the knight on g3, hinting at trying to occupy perhaps the h5 or the f5 squares. Black played queen b6, queen h5, and now queen d4, which I think is aimed at trying to get to f4 and g5. Let's say after rook a d1, I'm pretty sure the intention is to play queen f4. And then if the queen continues getting chased further, the black queen goes to g5, which is not a bad square at all.
Here, a move something like knight g3 takes h5 would be great to get the queen away from f4. It's weird.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, the queen.
I mean, something like queen e2 could actually be a serious consideration here with the intention of playing knight h5 next move. Another big question I would have here as white is, what do we feel about this position? Do we feel we are better or not? I guess he maybe wants to play queen d3 because allowing rook a d1 here looks like then black doesn't really have a good square for the queen. So maybe queen d3 aiming to either trade the queens or shift the queen away from a good f5 square.
Right. And it's funny because I always think of this bishop on g7 as really wanting to shift and take over another diagonal. If you just put that position on the board, Peter, that you had there a moment ago, and instead of move queen d3, I'm thinking bishop h6.
Bishop h6 and then queen f4 is also, it's
also something weird like that. And you know, my spidey sense were tingling there. If you could play knight c3 to e4 just a moment, you know, I did spy a pawn on b2 that was one reason why I was thinking to keep my queen on d4. Shame on me. I know, but there you have it.
Queen takes b2, d6 might actually become very risky for black. So
exactly,
yeah.
I might be hoisted on my own petard there for.
And actually, after queen d3, even here, I blundered knight e4 to begin with. It might not be playable at all for black because this looks very dodgy. Followed up by rook a d1 and then perhaps d6.
Ooh, good point.
Yes. I'm beginning to actually quite like knight f5 in this position. I'm interested in what Vladislav will settle on. Perhaps he's looking at something even more aggressive, but knight f5 is definitely a very playable move here.
Well, and it actually does completely force bishop takes f5.
More or less, yeah. Black could maybe play queen b4, but then why have we played queen d4 in the previous move? That would make very, very little sense.
Precisely. And here the rook left, the rover after knight f5, and queen b4, rook e1 to e4 kind of just plays itself. I would suggest.
Yeah, Vladislav started with bishop c2, which is also an interesting option. I think it prompts knight g6 more than anything else. And I can definitely get behind the idea of forcing knight to g6. And now in particular, I'm interested in the idea of playing bishop f5, not knight f5. To get the bishops off the board first, and then that knight on f5 will be extremely difficult to shift.
Yeah.
If you imagine some kind of a position like this, black really lacks any way at all to interact with this knight on f5, really, at least for the time being. So this position is quite dangerous, I would say, for Jan.
Well, I absolutely agree. And the black minor pieces, the knight on g6 and the bishop on g7, make a very sorry impression against this very powerful knight on f5. And as you say, I mean, that's an attack for free that Vladislav will
yeah, and this is what
happily.
he's gone for.
Yeah.
Jan quite quickly plays rook fd8, and
I was almost tempted to suggest heresy. I know it. Oh, I can't play e6 and sacrifice a pawn. There's a rook d1 problem that
yeah,
Jan
there's
is facing.
I don't think with the queen on d4, black is ready to open up the d file just yet.
Not at all. Not at all at all.
Bishop d7, rook d7 played, knight f5. I imagine the queen goes to b4 to at least try to tie up one rook to the protection of the b2 pawn. But the other option would be to play queen f4 and hope for queen g5. But
same idea, different concept. Queen d2 with the dual.
Queen d2. Yeah, queen d2 actually does both. Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Well, thank you very much.
Unless we are worried about getting mated after knight e4, but I don't think we are. I think we are reasonably okay with picking up either of the white pawns. Maybe the one on d5 is more important. Yeah, I like queen d2. I think of the moves we discussed, queen d2 is easily the strongest one.
And back to our number 1 versus number 2, our Nimzo Indian, and it seems to be
really does look like a Grunfeld, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, it was. By the way, excuse me, let me just correct you. A very good Grunfeld.
Excellent Grunfeld. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out if I feel like black is already much better or just slightly more pleasant. After queen c5, I think maybe rook c1 still holds on somehow, because we would like to play b6, b5, but knight takes b5 exists. And a6, queen a4 is a little bit awkward. You can play bishop g7, but after bishop g7, I thought there is some ideas like queen a4, hoping for some mass simplifications, and perhaps black survives. White survives, not black.
Were you unhappy with a6, queen a4, b5, Peter?
Unhappy, no, but I don't think. I think these positions generally tend to be holdable.
Okay.
Clearly, black is better, but
Exactly.
I think white probably does something like queen b5 here, and starts chasing. And if it's the endgame probably ends up being just very comfortable for white, even because the king comes in, and the white king is quite a lot closer to the pawn on c4 than the black is.
Agreed. And after queen c7,
even let's say if I centralize with queen d5, I already feel like it shouldn't be so bad. Maybe I'm understating the problems a little bit, but
okay.
Perhaps I need to play rook c3 first to make sure the pawn doesn't reach the c3 square. You probably play something like bishop g7, and I play queen d5. And then I start playing h4, and then king g1, king g2, king g1, king g2, and claim that my pieces now are quite well coordinated, and not much bad can happen to me here.
So not to rush the action with a6, b5, but to build up, if you will.
Yeah.
That's what Peter would recommend.
Magnus,
G7.
Magnus played bishop g7 first, to which Fabi replied with knight b5, queen a7, queen a4, and a5. If black ends up having, I think black would very much like, of course, in any kind of an endgame like the one we just discussed, to have his passer on the a file, not the c file, because that would, in particular, in conjunction with the bishop on g7, that would present a much bigger threat to white. But it still feels to me like this is probably a controllable position for Fabi. He's not going to enjoy playing it, but it feels to me like he probably ends up saving it in the long run. Even though, yes, like after queen d6, it's clear which side you should be preferring, queen d6 or queen c5 even. I don't know why I played queen d6. Queen c5 is perhaps a much more straightforward way to try and get the type of a position you want to get. White probably just goes something like knight f3 or knight e2. I don't know which one is stronger.
Yeah, I was always aspiring in such positions to get my knight to d5. Those
this is why I mentioned knight
protected
e2.
outposts, right? Yeah, knight f4. I understand exactly what you're talking about there, Peter. When a moment ago we had a pass pawn on the c file, now black aspiring to have a pass pawn on the a file.
Yeah, specifically, let's discuss this for a second.
Right.
If we get an endgame like this,
right.
If black already had a rook on c8 and could, let's say, rook c8, king g2, rook a8.
Right.
This is a very unpleasant endgame. I'm not going to say it's lost, but this is a very, very unpleasant endgame for white to try and hold. But the issue is, of course, white goes rook a6 in this position.
Long behind.
Yeah, and black is, if black goes for the direct approach here of trading c4 for b6 like that, he will not be able to stop the white rook from assuming the correct square on a6 or a8, and then it will be very difficult for black to win, which I guess is why Magnus says I don't need to hurry with any of this for now and goes queen d6.
Mm-hmm. Well, very good, very, very interesting situation from. I really like the play of the players. I mean, again, in a 15-minute game, they are playing a rapid game, and yet the quality of this game and that understanding of not playing a6, b5, and trying to go for an a pawn, that's deep. I mean, I'm really impressed that the players play at such a high level with little to no time for these difficult moves.
Mm-hmm. And I think the reason for queen d6 in particular is that knight e2 right now runs into queen d3, which is actually very difficult to face comfortably. Mm-hmm. Three things are suddenly hanging, and white probably ends up losing material here.
Agreed.
And that probably prompts white to play knight f3, but it's much harder for Fabi, I think, to find good squares for that knight to go further. From e2, you had the idea, as Yasser already pointed out, of landing it on d5 eventually. Maybe calling it an idea is a little bit optimistic. White has a dream. Of landing it on d5 one day, whereas from f3, it really isn't going anywhere at all. It's a little bit of a poor square.
Can I try to take a tactical approach to Fabi's mounting problems? Rook b5, with the idea perhaps of bishop takes d4, rook d5, and hoping that I haven't lost some material.
That's interesting, but I was going to suggest that when you said a tactical solution, I actually wanted to bring up something that Fabi actually ended up doing.
Okay.
Which is queen b3, and this ties in very well with something you said not today, but on one of the previous broadcasts when you were talking about the incredible importance, in particular at high levels, of understanding and trusting yourself to properly handle basic endgames. Mm-hmm. And Fabi looked at this for 2 to 3 minutes, and he thought to himself, with the bishop still alive and on the board, this appears to be a very unpleasant endgame. I am not entirely sure I will draw. So let's just sacrifice a pawn here with queen b3. I was about to suggest queen b5, but I think it comes to the same. I think black probably ends up having to go for it. Queen takes b6 here, black takes, we take, black takes on c4, we go rook a6. And I think for somebody who is not very confident in his endgame skills, taking a position like this with white and driving it towards a rook endgame where your opponent has a healthy extra pawn is a decision that will not come very naturally.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a decision that needs to be in your arsenal because it's very, very possible, and I was leaning towards that way myself, it's very possible that this is just the absolute best way practically to make sure you make a draw in this position. Yes, after some thought, Magnus does end up taking on d4. So we're going to see this endgame in a moment.
I, of course, am loath to hand over a pawn unless, I'm absolutely forced to. Queen b3, bishop takes d4, rook d1, Peter? Kind of a similar idea of my rook b5, rook d5.
Yeah, actually, this is... he hasn't done this, but why hasn't he done this? Huh. Interesting.
That pregnant pause, I assume.
I'm still trying to figure out if I can convince myself black is somehow winning in this endgame, but he isn't.
Okay.
I think it's just a draw. So yeah, I don't see anything particularly wrong with this, to be honest. And the speech I gave has kind of been borne out by what Fabi ended up playing, but I don't quite know why.
I enjoyed it tremendously. I was like, I'm learning a lot. He went,
well, I'm quoting you directly, so I don't know what you're learning, but
and it was a great speech. I mean, give yourself credit. No. Interesting that they have gotten the precise rook and pawn ending. That you were thinking that Fabi is confident that he can draw.
But after I said that, I started thinking, I think it's supposed to be a reasonably comfortable draw if that rook is on a2.
Okay.
But when that rook is protecting the pawn from the side, not from in front of the pawn, how easy of a draw is it? Because just to reiterate, this position is a tricky draw when the pawn is on the b file, but it's supposed to be a reasonably comfortable technical draw when the pawn is on the a file. And the way people tend to play it for a win is, once again, I'm just drawing a schematic here. It's clearly a lot more intricate than that. But just to show the general plan, eventually you have to give up something on the king side. Preferably the king needs to be closer to the a3 pawn, but I just don't have the patience to generate another 10 empty moves here. And then you go rook c1, rook a7, rook c3.
Right.
And then the king starts running towards the b4 square. And in the current situation on the board, the rook is already attacking the pawn from the side. So after king f8, let's say if white sort of sleeps on the job and goes king g2, king e7, and continues passing. Now after king d7, followed by king c7 and king b7, I think it becomes rather scary for white. But interestingly, Magnus actually just goes rook c1, rook a1, completely invalidating everything I was saying.
And I think what you were just saying was spot on. I think that, frankly, if you could just go to that position where white was sleeping on the job, as you put it, the rook was on c4. This is a very important chess technical knowledge. King e7.
Yeah, I think the reason he's gone rook c1, rook a1, just to interrupt you, is because rook a7 exists.
Okay, fair enough.
Because the king doesn't actually get to those good squares so easily. If you want to go towards the rook, you have to do it all along the back rank, giving white a lot of time to do something. So I suspect this is the reason Magnus ended up not going for that. But
okay,
your point was, if let's say we get here, yeah. So what were you trying to say?
But the point I just wanted to make is that very often you get this situation where you go like king d7. There's let's just say rook check, something like what king, rook takes, king b5, rook takes h7, and a3, and after rook a7. Yes, exactly. That was what I wanted you to draw, was that this is a very important motif that you need to know, that you can make a bridge for your rook pawn. Okay, but Magnus has gone for the rook in front of his pawn. He's also played a3, and I always thought that this is a very easy draw. Now, what do you think winning scheme that Magnus could possibly have in mind? For example, after white plays the move g4, g5.
I honestly don't quite know. One thing that perhaps, once again, for some of our viewers who may not be aware of this, it may look to them like this is clearly a winning position. You play a2, and then the king comes to b3, and then you play rook b1, and white resigns. That is, and g5 has been played. If you play a2, you might as well just offer a draw, because what ends up happening is, even let's say if white releases the king, and then the king runs towards the pawn on a2, and at the very last moment, the rook goes all the way up to a8 and starts checking starts checking from the side, and drives the king away from the a2 pawn, and then goes back to a8.
Exactly.
And that position cannot really be won at all. But if you keep the pawn on a3, of course it's not that easy, because black will have the a2 square to try and hide the king away if he ends up deciding for a king run there. But yeah, I don't know. It seems to me like, once again, of course, king f8 has been met in the game by the move rook a7. So
Exactly.
if Magnus decides to go for this, he will have to actually creep along the 8th rank here, play king d8, rook f7, let's say rook c1, as I described. And his king is so far away from the a file and the a3 pawn in general that white should be able to generate just enough counterplay on the other side of the board. If we imagine, let's say we continue the line, king h2, king d8, rook takes f7, black goes rook c1, rook a7, rook c3, and here we go f4, king c8, h5. This feels to me like there's never going to be enough time for black to be able to pressure the white rook into anything, because there's going to be a passer on the king side in just about the very immediate future, which will generally speaking be enough for a draw in pretty much every single case. And king d8 played by Magnus, he still runs zero risks, of course, but I also don't quite see where his winning chances are coming from here.
Well, let's lop that pawn off. Rook takes f7. We got to start with that one. That's a no-brainer. And then I'm assuming king c8, because rook c1, I just wanted to point out that the immediate rook c1, couldn't I capture, thank you, can I take another one?
No, I don't, a2, a1, right? That's
no, I'm sorry, Peter. Rook a7.
They've already Magnus sort of showed his hand there. He played after king d8, rook takes f7. He played rook f1, but now Fabi played rook a7, rook f2, king g3, and it feels like this is now just a very, very obvious draw, because if you play rook a2 here, I think white can quite safely take on a7 and then return
absolutely. The point that I wanted to make to Peter was that after, say, rook c1, I go rook a7.
And then rook h7. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going slightly mad there.
But it does look like this is a dead draw now. I don't think Fabi has any worries in the game position after this king g3. Rook
I think like a sane solution here is to actually go rook f5 or rook f8 or somewhere. Just don't even go rook a2 because I just don't think black is playing for a win here anymore. Rook a2, rook h7. I think it's time for you to start running towards the g file, because if you continue insisting, eventually h5, g8, g6 might beat you.
Precisely.
Like if you look at this position and you continue insisting you are better, like eventually you will have to start looking for precise ways to draw. And Magnus goes rook a1 and a2, which of course is still a very comfortable draw for everybody. But the result was never really in doubt for a while now.
I don't like Magnus's technique here in this game. I think that moment when his rook was on c4 and he decided to plant it on a1, that was really throwing away a future, if you will. I do think it was a better idea to, first of all, include the move h7, h5 for black, and then go on his journey over to the queen side. It wasn't to be. A draw in that game was already decided. Let's go to the other quarterfinals match, Peter.
Yeah, and here there at some point there have been mass simplifications, and it seems like the players are potentially repeating moves as well. We left it somewhere around here. Your very strong move queen d2 has actually been played, and game continued. Queen g4, rook cd8, h4, queen f4, and queen h3. And here, Jan, I think, absolutely correctly estimated that he needs to start driving that piece away. He played e6, and Vladislav went for this position where the black king is slightly compromised, but his pieces, frankly, look more active than the white pieces. which prompted Artemiev to trade all the rooks and then activate his knight at the price of the b2 pawn. This looks scary, but the knight on g6 provides enough cover so that there is no immediate mate. And Vladislav has been playing this pawn down position for a win for a while now, repeating, I guess, to gain some time, and then continuing to play on. This is the current position. I think White runs close to zero risk here, but I also think he very rarely actually ends up tricking his opponent enough to win.
Okay, I do speak in favor of this move g3, g4, though, because you are taking the f5 square under control, Peter, and on a very good day, you know, I mean, knight f5 check might be bothersome. You, I mean, the extra pawn, give me a percentage.
Yeah, eventually maybe we have time enough to pick up on a7, and my first instinct was, why can't we just play king g6? But I think allowing queen e8 check might be, well, by risky I mean losing, because I think the only move here that allows no forks is king g7, then check, and after king h6, white I think wins the knight with queen takes e7 and then knight f5 check, which is why Jan played h5, which is also a move I was considering, but I don't quite know what he's in. I guess he found some kind of perpetual after gh. I guess he just starts giving checks like queen g5 and then queen d5 and so on. And on a completely open board, it does feel like this probably ends up being a draw.
Right. And that knight f5 check is as a way of meeting h5.
I think we go king e7, and the pawn endgame is not better for white because a6 and b5 happens very, very quickly. So
I was thinking, sorry, Peter, I was thinking knight e7, queen e7, queen d5 check. I was thinking, I'm hoping that my a4 pawn neutralizes that side.
Yeah, but it still is a queen endgame 3 against 3, right? So you don't really have a very high expectation of converting this.
Absolutely true. Absolutely.
And Jan somewhat surprisingly played after gh, not queen g5 check, but queen d5 check. And now Artemiev played f3. And he will have the option after queen g5 check now of playing queen g4 and continuing the game, even though I feel like it's probably still a draw. Yeah, this has already happened. And now we can probably just take and go something like knight d5, knight c3, and eventually all the queen side comes off, and 2 against 1 on one flank is never going to be too problematic for Jan here.
I totally agree. That looks like a draw in that knight ending for sure. Well, I mean, it was a promising start, Peter. The positions were double-edged in balance. In particular, I thought that Vladislav, I liked his bishop f5 treatment and his winning control of the f5 square, I'm sorry, but it didn't bring him success.
Not entirely, yeah. We expect this game to finish in a draw. I quite like Jan's decision not even to take on g4 for now, keeping his options slightly more open.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and again, as just a reminder to everybody, we are in the day 2 of the quarterfinals in the groups A and B matches, and Jan and Magnus both have a lead. They won their first set of matches on day 1. Should those victors win again today, they will be in the semifinals. Those 4 players who will be eliminated in the quarterfinals will go home with $8,000, but it's much better to progress in the event and get to the semifinals where you're
absolutely
a little extra $15,000, $150,000 in total prizes being splashed around amongst our 12 participants who started the event. Sorry, Peter. This game sure looks like
I'm keeping it updated, but we all know how it ends, kind of thing. F4, king h6 played, and now white will take on g5, black will take on g5, white will go knight c8, and everything comes off.
Peter, I'm going to interrupt you and suggest that since this is a draw, we'll watch the players go perfunctory through this drawn position. Let's go to Anna and share a learning moment. Anna.
Thank you, Yasser. It is indeed this very game from which I chose the learning moment of the round. Even though the game ended in a draw, I do think that the maneuver that Yasser and Peter were highlighting is very instructive and something that any club player can learn from. If you look at White's position here, it looks like there's not much going on in terms of attacking chances, but after knight to g3, suddenly White is regrouping their pieces. And the idea is the following: the queen will land on h5, and we would like our knight on f5. Artemiev carried this out perfectly by, if we show the next few moves in the game, Nepomniachtchi's answer and queen to h5. And then the game continued with Nepomniachtchi activating their queen. And this is the case where I think it's very tempting for any player, beginner, club player, to jump to f5 right away with the knight because it's a beautiful spot. But if you think that you do want to keep that knight, then we need to come up with a different strategic plan and find a way in which we can eliminate first the d7 bishop and then have that beautiful post on f5 for the knight. And the maneuver is indeed what Artemiev carried out in the game, perfectly executed: bishop to c2, to then place the bishop on f5. You want to trade the light squared bishop, and in this way we will have that very strong post for the knight on f5. We can show the next few moves and how Nepomniachtchi defended very well by playing rook to d8, trade on d7, knight f5, and here a crucial move, queen to d2. The queen is a very strong defensive piece, and by playing queen to d2 and queen g5, Nepomniachtchi made sure that his king will be safe. But I promise you, if you try this strategic idea, how beautifully and powerfully Artemiev has managed to maximize the potential of his pieces on the king side, this should work against club players. So sometimes super grandmasters defend better, and as you can see at 2700, almost 2800, Jan Nepomniachtchi with the black pieces did find queen d2, queen g5, but I bet it will not happen at every single club tournament. So this was a beautiful, very educational moment, in my opinion. And now back to what's going on for the rest of the quarterfinals. Yasser.
Thank you very much, Anna. A very nice moment indeed. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to take a commercial break. We just had the first game in what promises to be 4 rapid games. And once again, in case those games are tied, we'll be going to Blitz, a pair of Blitz games. Lots of exciting action. Please stay tuned. We'll see you on the other side of this commercial break.
There are more moves in chess than atoms in the universe. But only one move ends the game.
My name is John Bartholomew, and this is the Checkmate Patterns Manual.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our live coverage of the Chessable Masters. I hope you enjoyed the first games as we get prepared for games 2 in these quarterfinals. Magnus Carlsen defended beautifully with the black pieces, and it's incumbent upon his opponent Fabiano to literally win on demand. He must win today, Fabi, or he is eliminated. Peter, that was a very impressive game by the world champion. My
I
goodness.
think so. Yeah, I was only mildly curious by your choice of the word defended, because he was
Yes.
on the attack for most of it.
Mhm.
And came at some point. It looked to me like he had very significant chances of actually jumping to an early lead and sort of breaking the serve, if we continue the tennis analogy.
Right.
Had he won the first game with the black pieces, I think Fabi would have been in extremely dire straits. But draw is still fine, and the match continues from a neutral with equal scores. Yeah, I can't figure out how to continue that sentence. A somewhat unassuming continuation chosen by Magnus here, and actually the structure we might see very soon here will be the exact same structure they've had in the previous game, only with colors reversed, which is not something you see very often these days, I think.
Yeah, an isolated queen pawn, but this kind of a Tarish, which is kind of interesting because we do have a special guest who will be joining us, a Chessable author, a dear friend of mine, Erwin Laami. Erwin has just been doing a course on the Dubov Tarish. I don't think this is the Dubov.
No, this is not the Dubov Tarish. The Dubov Tarish is a lot less tame.
Yeah. But this isolated queen pawn, my first impressions has always been that when black is the one, hosting the isolated queen pawn, white's extra half tempo, if you will, and this position in particular favors white. What's been your impression, Peter?
Well, it's definitely a slightly more pleasant position to play with white, but generally, my feeling is if the black ends up trading the light square bishop as early as it happened here and has the knights on f6 and c6, honestly, I'm a lot more familiar with these types of positions from the French, where the pawn would be on c3, not on e3. And that changes things quite a bit because, for instance, the long diagonal would not have been available to white here as comfortably as it will be in the game. But that particular material balance, I've come to believe that black isn't really suffering that greatly. You do often have to defend some rather boring endgame-ish positions, which is definitely not my cup of tea if we talk about my personal preferences. But
I noticed that
shouldn't be bad.
Magnus is taking a half moment, if you will. He's considering maybe bishop a3. Oh, something happened there very quickly. It went trunk.
Yeah, he played b3, and Fabi chose to take everything off on d4.
Gotcha.
Prior to the moment that white could play either bishop a3 and bishop b2, and now bishop d6, bishop b2 castles
on the board. Got it.
Yeah, on the board, and I think black is intending to play something like rook e8, bishop b5, and this is the boring-ish position I was referring to, if you will. If you imagine the dark squared bishops coming off here, which I think is not an unreasonable expectation. These positions with only the major pieces left and one pair of knights, they are not necessarily any kind of fun for black at all. But I don't think you lose them very, very often. Although Magnus, I'm sure, will be quite happy to play a position where he runs absolutely no risks whatsoever, and on a good day might create problems.
Well, but it's a specificity. I'll work on that one. This specific position, Peter, knight c3 threatens knight takes d5, and there's a checkmate on g7 hanging. So I'm not planning to recapture on d5, but rather go. So if, for example, rook e8, knight d5, I'm not falling for bishop h2 check.
You can actually. I was wondering about that because you can take here because knight takes d5, queen takes g7 is a problem.
Yes. That's
therefore, if black wants to do that, he needs to go for this position, which is genuinely a little bit worse for black after, let's say, takes and rook fg1 followed by rook ac1.
This is a patented Magnus Carlsen grind. I agree with that. Yeah.
So after knight c3, perhaps you are advised to play queen e6.
And that
with
was
the intention of playing bishop b5 next move.
Right.
But then
that
also
was where I wanted to play knight b5. And I wanted to play a game of give me the better minor piece. I wanted to take the bishop on d6 if permitted.
Yeah, knight b5 is a lot more awkward than I thought originally because, I mean, I can play bishop b8, but I'm not going to say I'm very happy about that prospect in particular because after rook ac1, I might not have a good reply to knight c7 next move.
Right. That's what we're
so
talking.
things aren't really going entirely according to plan.
Right.
And Fabi, I think quite reasonably is now thinking because it's probably an important choice that he is about to make here.
Right. As you say, if black gets in the moves rook e8, bishop e5, piece of cake, no problem. I mean, you neutralize the pressure on the diagonal. The d5 pawn wouldn't be weak. But it's just that this very specific position does present an awkward question to black. How is he dealing with, queen e6, knight b5? That could be an issue, or knight d5. And did you figure it out?
Yeah, I think he has settled on rook e8, and I was of the two slightly worse positions we were discussing. I think that endgame probably is the one you choose because I think you're reasonably comfortable. You shouldn't be losing it if you play properly. Okay. And queen e6, knight b5, I really didn't like at all.
Right, and knight d5, bishop h2 was our advice. And, those bishops versus knights positions, we've had some questions of what's the most underrated piece of advice or overrated piece of advice. What's your view? Bishop versus knight, pawns on both flanks, bishop favors knight by a big margin, Peter, or is that an overrated? Is that a myth?
No, I think it is a reasonably large margin, in particular in a position like this where knight, I mean, if black already had the knight on c6 and did not relinquish control over the open d file, it would have been fine. But the knight is some way away from it, and if you end up having to play some move like knight b6, where the knight really has no future whatsoever, I think it's just not great. Honestly, I don't think you enjoy that at all.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, we have a lift-off in the other match as well with an interesting choice by Artemiev to the Ruy Lopez, not the most common at top-level chess.
Yeah, this line, Janusz or something? I think it was Timur Razhubov was champion.
Yeah, Timur used to play a lot of Janusz at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Then he gravitated away from it because I think once the novelty, so to speak, wears off a little bit, it becomes a lot less easy to play. But to my knowledge, it hasn't really been refuted yet as such. It's just an opening which I think justifiably has a bit of a dodgy reputation. It's not supposed to be entirely correct, but the way Jan is playing against it is the way I always like to play against it. I always felt that 4d3 is, if it works, sort of exactly what I would like to be doing against the Janusz, playing for understanding more than for some kind of memorization. And there is a lot of memorization if you start talking about these lines where knight f6 and even d5. d5 is not really supposed to be any good, but the move still exists and it still requires attention, and it's really not that easy to prove. Black is doing so poorly in case, if you talk about computer analysis, for instance, perhaps the machines just refute it outright, but how easy is it to reproduce those computer lines is a big question. Whereas d3, you get positions where, just as in the game, let's say, you get positions where black has compromise his king side to a certain degree, the bishop will normally have a very nice life on the a2 g8 diagonal for white. And if you imagine some sort of a position like castles, bishop c4 check, king h8, knight g5, queen e8, and perhaps even maybe f2, f4 here. White does get a lot of very nice kind of active piece play here, and I always enjoyed it. But of course, things are never that easy, and in particular, the move bishop g4, you always have to have a good reaction to.
Peter, if I can ask you a salient question, how does a2, a4 fit in White's strategy? What's the?
Yeah, I've never actually seen that move before. It surprised me how quickly Jan played this. I think when I was looking at the Zemish, you were supposed to play something else in that position. I'm trying to remember exactly what, because I definitely studied this position when I was. For some reason, it fascinated me when I was really, really young, like when I was maybe 14, 15.
Right.
I remember spending quite some time looking at this and being quite fascinated by it. But A4 didn't really feature very large
right. My very limited look-see, it always featured queen d3. Queen d3 seemed to be a recurrent theme in many of the lines I looked at. I can't recall an a2, a4 in any of my variations, but I mean, modern chess these days and the chess engine, you show me a2, a4, I scratch my head in befuddlement and go, what?
Yeah, I don't really disagree. The one thing I will say is that perhaps it lengthens the potential a2 g8 diagonal, which means that the bishop on c4 will be much harder to chase down for black because it will have the a2 square available to it as well. But
Sure.
yeah, it feels like it's just that people these days just firmly believe that a4 in all kinds of Spanish / Italian positions is just beneficial to you.
Okay.
So they just go with that.
And what happened after a4, Peter?
After a4, bishop g4, queen d3 is on the board, and I think castles is, as usual, the most critical question here, because black at some point does need to commit to getting the king out of the center. Queen d7 long castles just doesn't seem feasible here. You're pinning yourself a little bit too much, and I think it's just time to bite the bullet and play short castles.
Well, it was funny that you said that, because right on cue, I was about to say, look, I'm losing this match. I'm being gifted an opportunity to have kings on opposite flanks. Those types of middle games, I think, are some of the most challenging. So queen d7, I agree. I'm kind of walking into multiple pins there. But, how can I resist playing such a complex position when I'm behind in the match? Is it too great a risk, Peter? That's, I guess.
In particular, I think what I dislike about it is that white can play a5. I don't think you can allow a6, having pinned yourself on this diagonal. And after a6, bishop a4. Like if you're castling queenside here, you're really castling straight into it. b4, b5 becomes a topic. After knight d5, I don't even know what you're supposed to play, honestly. It just feels like it might lead to positions which will be beyond repair.
Yeah.
And I understand and very much endorse your idea of sharpening things up, because Artemiev does need a win in today's set. But
right,
losing game 2 with black will not really advance his cause very, very far.
No, but with your moves a4, a5, and knight c3, d5, I got to tell you, Peter, you're really hurting black's feelings there, because that's
what I wanted to demonstrate. Yeah, that it's not just my kind of general dislike for the idea of castling long here.
I wonder how much black's feelings are hurting in the Carlsen Karana game, since there have been some updates, and I'm not really liking this position for Fabi, unfortunately.
Okay, let's take a switch over, Peter. Magnus making progress?
Well, what I was saying about the knight needing to be on c6 is, I think, something that influenced Fabi's decision to play knight e7 here. but I don't know if that was necessarily missed or not. But after rook c7, I just realized that knight c6, which is what I was expecting, straight up loses to rook g4. The game kind of ends here because the black position suddenly collapses.
That's
the king side is just falling apart. So he had to go knight f5 instead. And that is just not a particularly good square for this knight, in particular after rook f4. I'm not even sure where this knight is supposed to go, honestly.
This looks really simply gruesome. I mean, okay, here maybe I can struggle on with knight d6, but what about rook g4, Peter? I mean, there's a double hit. I can count pawns. f6 would be hanging after rook g4, but also b7's hanging. So
yeah, I just don't like this position at all. And rook f4 is probably not even the only way to play here. I suspect there are other choices as well.
Yeah, rook g4 was my choice, is what I was.
Yeah, rook g4. I was planning to play it on the next move. I was planning to drive the knight away and then go rook g4 to really cash in. But even the immediate rook g4 is very, very unpleasant. We're threatening the pawn on f6, we're threatening the pawn on b7, as Yasser said, and also a very simple threat of e3, e4 is...
Now we're talking.
Maybe h5, but after h5, rook g6, black continues kind of struggling to find moves because king h7, rook takes f6 is completely unplayable due to the pin on the 7th rank. It really does feel as if the position might be close to lost here for Fabi, which is a very striking development. As I said, the endgame starting from here is not fun. Nobody would ever describe this as being fun for black, but I really did not expect it to go this poorly.
Well, indeed, after rook d8, rook d4, f6, rook c1, the only thing I'm thinking is there was some calculation mistake, because the position that I'm seeing on the board after knight f5, I mean, both your move, rook f4, rook g4, I mean, this is horrifying.
Yeah, the only thing you probably don't have to do is to take on d8 and take on b7, because that actually gives black a very decent counterplay after rook d2. Even this position might, in some cases, be dangerous, but you definitely want to do more or less anything else but that.
Agreed. Yeah.
And Magnus, I think, is just enjoying the choice here. I think the move hasn't been played yet specifically because the choice is so pleasant. And we have absolute liftoff in the second one.
Okay. The game, rook g4, by the way, on Magnus's board, but this one blew up. Queen e8, f7 appears to be the last.
After queen d3, he did castle. Jan, as expected, played bishop c4 check and knight g5. But after queen e8, knight e6 is a very natural move here. But it may have been a very serious miscalculation, because Artemiev quite more or less instantly replied with knight b4. The queen has to go to some unfortunate squares because the bishop on g4 is still alive. You cannot go to e2, you cannot go to g1. Queen d2 played, and now queen f7. And of course, the point here is that after knight takes f8, queen takes c4. The knight on f8 might be just gone for all intents and purposes. And that would spell disaster for Jan here. And I don't quite see how you're supposed to avoid it if we're honest with ourselves here.
Well, even if we're dishonest with ourselves, I don't even see how to avoid a disaster. It looks like Jan overreached there, that move, as you described it, the natural move, knight e6. Looks like it has a stone-cold refutation to it. Queen f7, turning the tables. Knight c7, queen c4, knight a8. Two minor pieces for rook and pawn, but those minor pieces, they look wonderful, Peter.
Yeah, this cannot be the solution. This position, I think, is you can quite safely describe as simply lost for white. I mean, there is still some life in it, but you almost never expect to be able to survive this. Surely,
I agree, and especially the knight on b4, and just the beautiful open Sicilian kind of position for for Vladislav. A win, by the way, is what he needs today, not just in this game, but in all the sets today. Turning to Magnus, I've just seen this move, Rook G6, the very move.
Yeah, that's the position we were describing. Rook G4, H5, Rook G6. I honestly don't know how you survive this with black. Perhaps you play something like Rook C8 and you start chasing the second rook, hoping to catch the rook on G6 in the end, but that shouldn't work. Like Rook C8, Rook B7, Rook B8. I understand how miserable this is, but and honestly, just Bishop takes F6 probably is just completely winning, right?
Yes.
Rook takes B7, Bishop takes D8, and now this rook is free to get to A6, and white is just 2 pawns up with a better position, as they say.
Well, as comedian Jackie Gleason said, how sweet it is. 2 pawns up in the better position. Oh, if that's not a solution, and well,
but otherwise, if you allow E3, E4, you will just get mated. I think that's the biggest issue here. Black faces here is that if you allow E4, your position will just completely collapse. There will be nothing left.
So, for example, Rook D2, you don't even have to bother with Bishop F6. You're saying Rook D2, E4, and you just get mated.
E4 is, yeah, here I think Bishop takes F6 is probably not a mistake, but E4 is potentially stronger as well. Yeah, I don't mind that. I don't mind that one bit.
You don't mind that? That's nice. This looks like, Fabi, you fell out of bed this morning. This looks absolutely...
Yeah, the game sort of continues after Rook B2, Rook F2, let's say Rook G7, King H8. But yeah, you have very, very low expectations of surviving this with the black pieces normally.
Exactly.
Fabi has gone Rook D8, E8, which is stopping E3, E4, and also at least hoping to play Rook E7 next move. I suppose this is the reasoning behind that decision.
And maybe buttressing something you said, if white just says, okay, I'll leave F6 on tap for a moment and I'll play Rook D7, maybe in that case you can kind of demonstrate, that the rook on G6 might be a little bit stuck, Peter, for our audience. So like Rook B7 here, Rook B8, and what you're trying to do is chase the rook on B7 away, as you were mentioning, and exploit the rook on G6.
Yeah, this is a little bit tricky. Even though even that position, I suspect there should be some kind of a solution for white, but does not feel ideal for sure.
Exactly. And then the alternative, Bishop F6. How would
this is what Magnus played. He took on F6. Black played Rook E6, and now I mean probably the most obvious way to not lose material here would be to move the move E4, which is what he ends up playing. E4, and I think black needs to take on F6 and play this rook endgame, but it's just such a poor endgame.
Ooh, if I could even suggest, put the pawn on G6 in that variation, Peter. Oof, that the pawn on G6 makes such a even more pleasing impression. So how would it go? It go Rook takes F6.
Yeah, Rook F6 CF. Maybe that's even stronger. Although it does allow Rook F7. I don't know. Maybe the fact that there is Rook F7 shifts your opinion a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a pity. I was hoping for Rook G6, FG6, obviously, when that pawn creates a mating entanglement. But yes, no. In that case, you're absolutely right, Rook F6.
And Fabi goes Rook takes E4, I guess with the intention of after Bishop takes G7 playing Rook G4, either immediately or perhaps you include the check first to drive the king further away from the black pieces. But this is also really not great at all.
First impressions, Peter, is there's a tremendous blow, Rook G5, tickling the rook at once, as they say. Ooh, the knight. The knight. We want to blast the knight away.
Yeah, that I missed, and that does seem like maybe a cleaner solution even, because the knight clearly cannot go anywhere from F5, and
Yeah, here the rook g4, rook f5. That's
Yeah,
not
that endgame is horrible to look at. Even rook b7 probably is the cleanest, keeping both pawns under attack. And yeah, black's position will just collapse here.
Again, Fabiano is in a situation in this quarterfinals where he absolutely has to be the victor in today's set of games. Else he will lose the match. Magnus will be our semifinalist. Rook e4, and here's Magnus thinking about bishop g7, thinking about rook g5. It all looks good. How did Nepo handle this? Oops, that is the...
Yeah, he really had to go for it. So we cannot really blame him for going for this position. He included knight b5 first, which I think is a sensible enough idea, at least forcing black to play knight a6, because otherwise the other knight will support the knight on e6. But knight a6 is quite clever here. He took with the e6 knight, took on a8. Artemiev spent some time here trying to figure out if he can somehow pick up the pawn on e4 first and then go after the knight. But came to the conclusion that that doesn't quite work. Took on a8. Jan played b3. There will be some technical issues here because I think Jan's next two moves are probably f3 and bishop a3 in some order. I don't entirely know which order, but
I have to congratulate Jan and finding a way of at least making it awkward for his opponent. Because
it definitely is. It definitely is a lot more awkward than I originally anticipated. This is a good sequence by Jan, in particular because that knight on a6 is looking rather silly. He still wars, but there's definitely a game going on at the very least here, which wasn't necessarily the case.
Here, I think I've always had this as a issue because if you ever play a lot of chess, you're going to get into those positions where you have two minor pieces for the rook. And I've always had that as a kind of an awkward issue. Maybe it's just this specific position, Peter. What's a general rule of thumb? When you have the two pieces, are you looking to trade queens or keep them on? In other words, in that exact position, should queen e2 or queen b4 be considered? Or when you hold the minor pieces?
I think it very much depends on the structure. And I think with the pawn on d6 being as weak as it is, black probably wants the queens on the board to have more tactical ways of dealing with potential issues which will come up.
Did you ever create a principle for such positions?
No. I think it's on a case by case basis for me. I don't quite know how to sort of codify this, but I probably would have done as Vladislav has done, yeah, and kept the queens on.
Bishop e6 on the board. Let's just check in with Magnus as he putting the finishing touches on a game that we're thinking is terrible for Fabi.
Yeah, as long as he doesn't blunder rook e1 mate, I think he's fine. And I think it's very difficult to blunder rook e1 mate in this position because black has just played rook a8 e8, so he is telegraphing the intention to play rook e1 rather strongly here. So I think both f3 and g3 look mightily attractive here.
Exactly. Well, I mean, to my mind, being the materialist I am, move like g2, g3, which, by the way, does attack a rook, it attacks a knight. And there's some mating threats that Fabio is facing. Isn't that just a clincher, Peter?
Well, it looks horrible. I think black has to play rook g4 here, simply because there's nothing else. Rook f5, gf, and yeah, this position is just bad. There's no real way to describe it. The one kind of a semi-saving grace for black here is that he wants to play rook g7, so we cannot really take on h5 and then pick up on b7 at leisure because of rook g7. So we probably end up taking on b7, and then black plays h4. And at least some semblance of counterplay appears on the board, but should not be enough.
Well, having said that, how about in that case the move? Oh, sorry, light board G3. I was about to suggest F3, the alternative. Also,
yeah, this is why I thought F3 was quite clever, but G3 shouldn't really spoil anything either. I don't think it's a large issue.
Fair enough. Okay, and these are we may be treated to decisive games here.
Yeah, and in the second one, Vladislav actually went for a conversion of one advantage into the other. After c4, in this position, he went knight c5, rook b1, a6, knight c3, and just chose to trade in his two pieces that he had for the rook for the large part of the white structure here by taking on b3, taking on c4. Jan played queen b2, and Jan actually preserves, I think, decent drawing chances because his structure remains very solid, and as long as his pieces don't get shifted to really unfortunate squares here, even the endgames, I think, hold reasonable drawing chances here for white because of how solid his structure is. Having said that, something like bishop d8, b6, whoops, arrows again. Bishop d8, b6 might become a reasonably big problem here for white.
Boy, my first impression, though, Peter, I can't shake it, is that maybe Vladislav cashed in his chips a little early with that knight d3, bishop c4. I agree.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice, not an obvious one. Let's put it like this. I think he definitely could have maybe waited for a bit, but he is of course still better. He has an extra pawn, and also I thought queen c5 check was very clever by Vladislav there, making sure that white absolutely has to play rook f2 due to the fact that king h1, bishop takes f1 would be a noopsie. And now after rook f2, takes, rook c8, bishop d2, and I guess now we play bishop d8. I think that Jan does have positional compensation, but he might not get to use it because he might just never be able to deal with the very, very active pieces that black has.
Yeah, pieces feel a little gummied up. I don't know if that's actually a word, gummied, but yeah, I mean, he's tied up, and you're right. I mean, black's queen on c5, rook c8, the knight on f6 is ready to jump, but bishop to d8 to b6. It looks like pawn in compensation to me.
Yeah, bishop d8, I think maybe the only move even is knight d1 to have bishop b3 available to us as a reply to bishop b6. But yeah, even let's say the endgame after queen c2, I think white was obliged to take, and then the pawn on a2 might just get picked up in the near future because you still have to care about bishop b6. I guess bishop b3, and yeah, doesn't necessarily look all that great for white. Bishop d8 on the board, meanwhile, and as mentioned, I think apart from knight d1, white doesn't really even have any half sensible choices. Everything else appears to be more or less losing on the spot, as far as I can tell.
Very good. I cast my eye over to the game of Fabiano, and I saw that he made this move rook a8, and I just was like kind of like recoiled in horror. And a rook ending, if you have to put your rook in such a defensive position, things are really bad. Things are really bad.
Things are really not going from bad to worse here for Fabi. And let's say if we have the same position, but the black king is on e6, I suspect it's still probably lost.
Right.
But I'm a lot less sure about that. But with the king also being cut off on the back rank here, I think there is almost no hope whatsoever, because even the absolutely straightforward winning plans of, I don't know, pushing the pawn all the way up to b7 might be winning in some positions here.
Exactly, with the king cut off on the 8th rank. What Peter is saying there is just, even if you give black everything you want, you put your pawn on b6, and a black rook magically appears behind the b pawn. It may just be gone with the king not actively placed on e6. And I think that says about straightforward a book win as you can get from Magnus, just going with the program and pushing his b pawn up the board, Peter.
Yeah, the question is, let's say we imagine, and in the meantime, all of this has already been played.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say after b6 they go rook b5, and you still need to formulate. But I guess f5, king h5, king g6 will win in some fashion, right?
Right.
That probably is what ends up happening. White diverts the black pieces towards the b file, and then picks up the pawn on f6 for the pawn on b6 and wins that one quite comfortably. I guess this is extremely likely to be the final outcome here.
Right, and we just have seen Magnus played not b6. He just played the move f5, leaving, not allowing the rook to immediately get behind the pawn. f5 on the board by Magnus, and king f8. So that, like extra little improvement certainly helps Magnus's position.
Yeah, and in particular here, you played b6. There's no way Fabiano can afford to allow rook c7 and b7. That will just win on the spot.
Right.
Therefore, you have to play rook b5. And I suspect in this position, king h5, rook f5, king g6 just ends the game pretty much. Because once again, rook c7 and b7 will just be mate if you allow that. And if you go back to b5, white picks up the pawn on f6, and then this is about as easy a technical win as you can find in chess, I think. So
this is really, really nasty, because I just saw f2, f3 on the board so that when you do go that king.
Oh yeah, this is really putting the nail in and
twisting the knife, or however it goes. Magnus's poetry, when he is on his game and he is playing, so very, very well, it's impressive, Peter. I mean, and it's just...
It is, yeah, it is. It's nice to watch him in full flight. Admittedly, I really feel like Fabi probably did not play that game as well as he normally would have, but you still have to beat him. And as someone who has played a decent amount of chess against Fabi, I want to attest that how difficult it is to win a game of chess against him. He is a very, very tenacious defender.
Exactly.
And Magnus made this look very, very easy.
Impressive.
Which it wasn't.
Bishop versus
which it
knight.
Definitely wasn't.
Yeah, ending. Let's turn to the other game, as I do want to say that we have a learning moment coming up. But what happened in the Nepo? What's happening? Peter.
I'm not entirely sure, because after knight d1, the move d6, d5, which is what Vladislav ended up going with, it occurred to me, but I couldn't really work out what's happening after queen takes b7. And this is what Jan played, bishop b6 now by Artemiev. And now we can go bishop b3, let's say d4, and bishop somewhere, I don't know, d5. And maybe there's a tactical solution, but I don't see it yet. But I guess black maybe doesn't even need a tactical solution because his position is so nice. But yeah, I'm not 100% certain what we're supposed to think about this.
Well, giving back the pawn, maybe there is a forced solution, but at the moment I'm missing it. D3. Bishop will retreat back to
E3. I think we go back, and I was trying to calculate some kind of romantic ideas like this, but I don't see a final blow after knight f1.
Well, the nice part is maybe you're onto it right here, Peter. We do have, I forget that knight g8 will defend checkmate. Oh, but d2, queen takes b6.
Yeah, queen takes b6. We're simply a pawn up because there's no mate, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
I promoted my pawn, but I haven't won any material. That's
yeah. The pawn does get to be the queen, but we've completely ruined our position in the meantime. So I don't know how great that is.
This is one of those books that belong in the combination, the boomerang, the boomerang book of combinations. So instead of having a combination book where every tactic wins, we have the opposite type of book, Peter, where every tactic boomerangs. This is a boomerang.
Indeed, yeah, it's curious. And Jan starts by playing a5, to which Artemiev very quickly goes bishop a7. We should mention the clocks. The clocks are now 3 against 2, so both of them, despite this being move 30, are still I think for players of their pedigree in online and blitz chess in general, they're still reasonably comfortable, I think, on this time. It's really not panic stations time yet. And Jan does end up playing bishop b3, d4, and bishop g5 as expected. But with the inclusion of a5, bishop a7, which I quite like, because the bishop is sort of clearly slightly less well positioned on that square.
And I always think in terms of what our pieces are doing as well, Peter. And for me, the bishop on b6, whether it's important or not, does stop queen b1, I don't know, queen b3, queen b2 retreats. So the inclusion of a5 was, in my view, like yours, very clever. I like that inclusion a lot.
Yeah, I think it's clearly a good thing, and Black now needs to show exactly what he means here.
Is it right? Yes, this is the moment. Vladislav was up a pawn before. He seemed to be nursing a pawn and very good pieces. He returned the pawn to get his d pawn to the d4 square, and now he needs to follow up again. Vladislav, the number 1 seed from the preliminaries, is in a position he needs to win today's set. We've just seen rook b8, Peter.
Yeah, rook b8, I think, is very logical. And also this, you could say that this is the one difference between a5, bishop a7 and no a5, bishop a7, which is in Black's favor, because now this rook is very squarely aimed at the b1 square, where it will generate a ton of very, very dangerous threats. Honestly, I'm not even sure how we're supposed to deal with this.
Queen takes a6. You know me, Peter.
Queen a6, rook b1.
Queen David 3.
Queen d3. I missed queen d3. Do I need to include d3 earlier? It's kind of a strange one, because there's also no d3 earlier. Probably doesn't work. So queen d3. How is this position?
Am I lost?
I don't know. I don't know. Like queen d2 or queen e1. I don't know which one you prefer, honestly.
I'll go with the one you chose. Hanging in there. I'm not feeling it, Peter.
Yeah, the knight on f6 is just so cut off from all the action. That's the piece that Black kind of is lacking in his attack. If you could somehow get this knight to participate, but it's completely restricted by these 2 pawns. Queen a6 played. Yeah, I think there was probably no other choice, frankly. So not really surprising that this is what
rook b1 did look frightening. I meant to say.
Yeah, and you just need to bring the queen back into the defense. Something like queen f7 looks attractive for a second, and then you realize you are not the one giving mate here. You are the one being mated on the other side of the board, and
right.
There's just no time to play bishop f6, because Black quite simply goes d4, d3, discover, check, and then picks the rook up with mate. So queen a6, and now Black will need to demonstrate what he has. Rook b1 played. I assume queen d3 will be blitzed out, because any other square you will just lose to d4, d3 on the spot. You cannot afford to allow Black to open that bishop on a7 for free. Hang on a second. Is this whoa? No, it doesn't work. I was getting very excited about this move.
Wow.
But it doesn't work, because queen takes b1, queen e1 check, rook f1, d3 discover check, and then the rook actually protects the queen on b1, and Black ends up not giving any kind of mate. Otherwise, queen c3 would be a very nice geometrical trick, which, well, he played rook f1. Interesting. I did not think this was possible, but maybe it is. I guess the point is after d3 check, king h1, queen f2, white still has queen takes d3. Yeah.
Whoa!
I keep on trying to give some very beautiful mates, but there are just no mates anywhere.
Some beautiful geometry there. I just wanted to say that you can't after d3 check play the move bishop e3 because black is very happy to give up his queen for all your pieces and your king. Oops.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So things are really getting out of hand a bit here for Vladislav. What's going on in the current position, I mean?
I really don't know. I think black probably is still fine, but after d3, Jan will just take on d3, allow queen g1 check, and go to e2. And it is now black who has back rank issues, which means that there is no obvious way to let's say after queen takes g2, king I don't know, g1, or even maybe d1, and then run towards the queen side. I'm beginning to like white in this position, honestly.
Exactly. There is an a5 pawn still on the board, so we do have d4, d3.
Up to d3, all of this has been. I guess Jan is trying to figure out if bishop e3 just wins on the spot, which it might.
Oh, there's a background mate threat of queen c8. Gotcha.
Yeah, that would be a very, very bitter pill to swallow for Vladislav, because I think he's been driving the action. I think he can still play queen c2 though. Maybe everything is not lost as such, because after queen c2 we create the threat of queen b1, which is very strong. And this is, I guess, why Jan hasn't played this yet.
Well, in that case, can I play like g4 or something, Peter?
Maybe g4, but knight f4, I guess. Yeah.
Oh shoot! Oh.
And you might. He played bishop e3 and queen c3 replied by I think he is planning to give up this piece now. I think this might be his intention. Just takes, and now play a6 and go for knight e5, knight c6, and a7.
That might
I have a feeling this is what he's going for here.
That might just be winning, Peter.
He played g3, not g4, but g3, which is a lot smarter, obviously.
Also,
what? Bishop takes a3? What?
Keeping the checkmates alive. There's a
no. This actually happened.
It's very alive, that checkmate, back rank mate on the board.
Oh no! Oh no!
Maybe there was no choice. Maybe I guess g3 was just winning. Maybe, but that would imply that maybe queen c2 was stronger, or possibly g3 was winning anyway, because after queen e2, king g2, you still have no defense against queen c8 mate. Yeah, very dramatic conclusion to that game, which really felt like Vladislav was in control of for
Let me just set the table here a bit, Peter, as we do have Magnus Carlsen and Nepo taking a 1.5 to a half-point lead. In fact, it's their opponents who needed to win to stay in the match. And oh my goodness, it looks like another game has already started. I actually wanted to take us to a learning moment.
I think we can still do that, because that opening, they will seemingly they're playing a very theoretically heavy f3 Nimzo, and we can talk about the theory of that line later if there's a learning moment to talk about. Let's learn something.
Yeah,
I promise to be very brief here, since we all want to catch up with the action in this game 3 between Caruana and Carlsen. But I do want to choose the learning moment of the previous round between these two. After move 19 in the game Carlsen-Caruana, I thought rook c7. Well, we all know the rook always wants to go to the 7th or 2nd rank, depending on from which perspective you are looking at the board. Rooks are extremely powerful on the 7th rank. And this move is particularly strong since now the knight and the pawn are hanging. The only way to try to escape from the situation is knight to f5, which attacks the rook on d4. And I want to highlight here that it's very tempting after knight to f5 to go pawn grabbing by taking on d8 with check and then taking the pawn on b7. But this trade on d8 is actually not advisable, since it activates Black's rook, and now rook to d2, the same motive. Rooks on the 2nd or 7th rank are very powerful, and Black has enough counterplay to make it through this endgame. So the winning move was that Magnus Carlsen played rook to g4 after which there are way too many threats. So instead of taking on d8, instead of trading the rooks, now rook to g4, threatening bishop takes f6, threatening e4, and the pawn on b7 is still hanging. Fabiano tried with h5, but then the precise move is rook to g6. So many pins are there on this board that, for instance, if king to h7, white can simply take the pawn on f6 with the rook. So king h7 steps into rook takes f6. And if instead what happened in the game, rook e8, the pawn was taken on f6 with the bishop and the final tactical motive. So instead of king h7, we had rook e8 in the game, bishop takes f6. If we show that moment real quick as well. And now this final tactical motive that Magnus, of course, saw was that if rook e6, which happened in the game, this pins the bishop. So it does look like white would lose the piece, doesn't it? Now there's a very strong and only move here for white, e4, which attacks the knight. So in case black takes on f6, we will also take the knight on f5, and the knight cannot jump away because the g7 pawn is hanging. This was the way in which Magnus Carlsen took a winning advantage in his game against Fabiano, and now we shall see whether Caruana can make it back in game 3.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was a very, very nice game indeed by Magnus. I just want to take a moment here to tell you that Grandmaster Erwin Laami will very, very shortly be joining us. Erwin, one of Holland's very strongest Grandmasters, is also noted for being a great coach as he works with Anish Giri. He has done a Chessable course, and he's going to tell us all about it when he joins us. In the meanwhile, Peter, back to you. What has happened in this heavyweight theoretical discussion that Fabi and Magnus?
Yeah, it's a line of the F3 Nimzo, which I think is not currently the most topical one. I think there are other ways of treating the F3 Nimzo which have superseded this. But it's what used to be, I think, the absolute central line of the opening: d5, a3, bishop takes c3, bc3, and c5. This used to be very, very central in the theory of the F3 Nimzo. I can name a few players. In my mind, and I understand it will sound a little bit silly, the F3 Nimzo, and in particular this line, will, I guess, forever be associated with the Russian Grandmaster, who is not that famous, I think, in the West, Sergei Volkov, who I think played the F3 Nimzo for the entirety of his 30-plus year career, really not straying very far away from that opening at any point, which is, you know, a very admirable faith being shown to the one line. CD5, knight takes d5, dc5 is the absolute main line here. Queen a5. Seemingly the pawn on c3 is hanging with check, and I mean, I use seemingly here slightly ironically. It is hanging with check, but white says, "Do go on, please take it if you wish," and plays e4. And it turns out that queen takes c3, of course, is ill-advised because of bishop d2, and then the knight will fall. And if you take on c3 with the knight, queen d2 followed by bishop b2 is very, very good. And then there's a huge discussion on whether this knight is supposed to go. I think all the moves that don't lose the knight in this position have been quite seriously discussed and played in Grandmaster practice. Knight f6, knight e7, yeah, arrows, knight f6, knight e7, and knight c7 even. But knight f6, I think, is probably the main one. Bishop e3. Once again, black doesn't take on c3 here because it just gives up tempi that white needs to bring his pieces into the game. Black goes castles, a4, knight 6 d7, and king f2. Generally, this is where this king belongs in this line. White doesn't even attempt to castle very often because of how comfortable this king is in this little hidey hole on f2. But perhaps Irvin can tell us something about the theory of this line, because I think I'm out. I don't really know anything else. I've exhausted my very, very limited knowledge.
Wow. I don't know. Erwin, have you joined us? Don't hear a confirmation yet from Erwin.
I think he will be here in a minute. And
Okay.
in the meantime, I do want to remind our viewers that to every guest we have on the show, you can also ask them questions if you use the hashtag #StudyChess. So take advantage of this moment if you want to ask a question to Grandmaster Erwin Lamy, longtime second of Anish Giri and the author of multiple courses and books. Do let us know on Twitter by using the hashtag #StudyChess what would be your question to Erwin. Thank you for the heads up, Yasser.
Absolutely.
And there he is.
Okay.
Handsome as ever.
We summoned the ghost. Welcome to the show, Erwin.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Nice. Erwin, where are you, by the way, if I can ask?
I am in the most beautiful city of the Netherlands, Woerden, close to Utrecht for people unfamiliar with Woerden.
Most beautiful city.
Yes.
Okay. Already contentious. Nice to have
Strong
you.
words, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, Peter. Nice to have you with us, Erwin. You've been watching the action. Anish has been playing very, very well. Backed his way to victory. I'm sure you enjoyed watching that
Absolutely,
spectacle. Yeah. Your overall take of the Chessable Masters?
Well, it's been great. I think I really like the format. So I've been enjoying the qualification stage a lot. And especially, well, today and of course the first match with this matches between Carlsen and Caruana, they're always fantastic. I was, of course, after the clutch match that they had, I was expecting a little bit more of a close. It looks like Carlsen is really dominating so far, but I always like to see these two head to head. So it's been very exciting for me so far to watch.
I agree. The preliminaries we're just on the edge of our seats there.
Exactly, yeah.
And well, now we're in the knockout match phase, so lots to look forward to. Erwin, you've come at a very good moment because in the game between Fabi and Magnus, the exact position that they have on the board, both Peter and I, we're tapped out on our theoretical knowledge. We wanted to bring in an opening theoretician like yourself to
the pressure is on, man.
Come and guide us through the byways and the pathways that we're currently facing. What's going on, Erwin?
Well, I'm afraid I have very bad news.
No.
No.
I'm not sure I can tell you much. I've honestly, perhaps I've looked at this position once or twice, but the problem for me is that when I haven't seen the position for a couple of weeks, it's usually just totally gone. So maybe I see Peter nodding. I don't know if this is recognizable, but for me,
it's very much the same for most people these days, and it's exactly like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I may have seen this position before, but it doesn't ring a bell, to be honest. I do like that for black. It's pretty obvious then what the next few moves are. I guess bishop a6 will come. Get the knight on b8 out, rooks to d8, c8, and that's pretty obvious. So I think white has to really show something here. That's I guess a pleasant thing to be having with black.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all of that. I think strategically, black's play is just simpler here. You do want bishop a6. You want to connect the rooks somehow. In particular, of course, if white takes on a6. But even if he doesn't, you can develop this knight over to d7, rook d8, rook c8. There is this complex of potential weaknesses on the queen side. And generally, black's position contains no weaknesses whatsoever right now. So there's really not very much to worry about, apart from maybe some potential tactical issues with the queen on a5, which are somewhat highlighted by the move bishop b5. If you imagine white playing c4 and bishop d2, that queen might be gone. But of course, Magnus will have something to say about it. I think bishop b5 is mainly aimed at trying to provoke a6, which will take away that square from the bishop, at least making it slightly more difficult for black to develop
and this
exactly
is
the way he would like to.
Yeah, this is a moment I really wanted to jump in and say, there is a trick here. There's knight e2 saying maybe...
Yeah, that's actually very clever. I didn't see that.
Yeah, maybe your
b5,
queen
ab5
a5 is a little bit, well, I don't know, vulnerable. There we have it. Peter,
I like this. I like this quite a bit. Yeah.
Yes.
But honestly, I just don't like a6. So sadly for us, I don't expect this nifty little trick to actually appear on the board. I would like to continue with my bishop a6 play if I'm able, but I guess white is intending to take maybe even, and say that now I can sort of see how I can be better in the future because I have more pawns. And if you try to win that pawn back straight away, maybe I can go knight e2 here. And
can we start with knight 97, Peter, instead of...
yeah, I'm sorry, I missed 97. Yeah, of course. Yeah, sorry. I just blanked on the fact that this move is possible. I guess we go queen b4, but that probably ends up being some kind of a draw, right?
Yeah, just taking on b4, on b5.
Take on b4, take on b5, go rook fb8. This always ends up
like that, yeah.
Like mass simplifications and a draw. Pretty much in every single case. So yeah, I think bishop a6 is the most topical move here. Perhaps white can find something there, but this is where we should be looking. Maybe white can go bishop c5, bc5, and just develop a knight here. Invite black to take on b5, ab, queen takes b5, rook hb1. But here as well, like why should black be so unhappy is my question.
Well, maybe you can take on c5 after bishop takes b5.
Oh yeah, this is the position I wanted actually. Yeah,
and now you get a good version of
yeah, this is exactly the position I wanted. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. This is not immediate equality for sure.
Erwin, first of all, I want to say congratulations on your chess course. Secondly, I also wanted to say congratulations on your answer to the question of the day. You have won your own copy of your own chess course.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well done for both things. But I always like to ask the chess authors, because I like to say about myself that no matter how badly I teach, I always learn something. What is it about your chess course on the Dubov Tarash that you learned yourself that surprised you?
Well, first of all, this line, it has existed since, well, more than 100 years already, but it used to be considered not playable. So the mere fact that Dubov took it on and actually made the whole line playable, that was already a huge thing to learn. Yeah, well, Peter is showing the moves already. This line used to just considered to be pretty bad for black. Yeah, bishop c5, yeah, etc. Can take on c6 here. Knight b3 is a move. There are many moves here. Too much to go into right now, obviously, but it was just considered that after knight b3 in this position, that black would go, for instance, bishop b4. If we can briefly show that on the board of knight b3, that after bishop b4 castle, that black would have to take on c3 in that position and give up the pair of bishops, and that's of course a little bit of a lousy position. But Dubov showed that after move knight b3, you can actually just go bishop b6, sacrifice that pawn on d5, and that actually turned out to be completely fine. So that entire concept actually is entirely new, and one of the many things actually that Dubov recently brought to the game, because he's, I think, been one of the most inspiring players when it comes to opening ideas in this era.
Yeah, absolutely. That last statement is something I've said countless times on air. I think he is very much, a major driving force, moving the game forward in terms of finding interesting new ideas and.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit. I mean, the game against Artemiev, I think it was, comes to mind from the previous. From the qualification. I mean, so many interesting ideas, and yeah, it's just remarkable actually, because we're all working on the game, but somehow he's the one coming up with all the fun ideas. It's I don't know.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, there was a great crying in the Cosmic Force when Donald crashed out at the preliminary.
Yeah, that was because I agree with the Cosmic Force. Yeah.
Because for me, the game that he defeated Magnus with that rook b2 and queen c2 maneuver was really a work of art. So I mean, it was sad that some they had to make room for our quarterfinalists, Erwin. Now let's talk a little bit about your boy. Yeah, Anish seems to be as usual in fighting trim where the social media is concerned, but he's also been playing really well of late. Your take?
Yeah, I think that given his previous results in the Grand Chess Tour, Rapid and Blitz, which weren't always great, I think at some point he took a conscious decision to focus on Rapid, Blitz, and then of course Corona struck, and basically everything became Rapid and Blitz, online events, and he really took that very serious. I think it's been now starting to show in his results. I mean, he had this match with Magnus, of course, in the first leg of the tour, which was a great result for him. But now he starts fighting for the prizes now. So I'm very happy to see that.
Obviously, back to the game, Peter. The players following our analysis there.
Yeah, very much so. But instead of bishop a6, he played bishop d7, which I think is played with the intention of having rook c8 as an option available to him. You still need to have the answer to knight e2, though. I'm not entirely sure what the plan here is. We'll need to figure that out.
Queen b6.
Yeah, maybe just queen b6. But I mean, how happy are we with this endgame? Is my question here.
Bishop takes b5. Just follow that, Peter.
You want to take on
bishop b5? And yeah, I don't know. Maybe takes, and.
At the same time, we have a lift-off in the other match as well. 1b3. Erwin, your thoughts on this opening choice by Artemiev?
I won some fantasy points. I'm very happy.
I think I'm losing some. I was just thinking it was in the fantasy contest, and I think I said there will be no 1b3. I'm so regretting it.
Well, actually, speaking of Artemiev, I just finished today recording my next Chessable course on the Caro-Kann, and I saw Artemiev also played e4, c6, g3 once. So in that sense, I think b3 is a completely normal way of starting the game. I don't know. I think jokes aside, Artemiev he generally doesn't aim to decide games in the opening. So for him, it's just I think he's more than happy to just get a game and start playing. He's one of the. It's quite rare, I think, these days. He's one of those players that really doesn't seem to be all that bothered by a deep opening prep.
It almost seems like the combination of Donald and Vladislav together would be very formidable. I mean, the way it's being described. Peter, take us from the start. 1b3. How did the players get here?
Yeah, b3, e5, bishop b2, knight c6. This is sort of the old main line, and bishop b5, bishop d6 in particular is very much how they used to play this opening in the times of yore, and I'm using the times of yore here.
Thank you.
Very, very liberally, maybe 20 years ago is what we're referring to here. But yeah, that used to be very, very topical. Knight a3, knight a5, bishop b2, a6. Somewhat surprisingly, all of this has been sort of well researched at some point. Weird as all these moves might look to our viewers. c4, I don't believe I have seen c7, c5 in this position. I would have thought just returning with a knight to c6, castling, playing rook e8, and so on would be quite normal. But c5 is a way to fight over for the center, which is also quite logical. Knight c2, knight c6. And here, because of the fact that knight f3 is met quite well by e5, e4, Vladislav goes for the immediate d4, which is a very sharp attempt to fight for advantage, which is connected with having to play king f1, but I'm pretty sure he is not really that unhappy about it. This is the position we have on the board right now, and he played bishop f3. If you imagine white already, let's say the knight on g1 is on g3 and white castled. White, I think, is close to winning. So you can definitely see why Vladislav would like this, because from a purely strategic point of view, I think that there is a lot to be happy about here with white. The question is, of course, whether black can develop something significant in the center here before actually white gets out of the corner, before white, let's say, goes knight e2, knight f4, g3, and king g2 after, which I think it might be already a little bit too late.
Well, I see Erwin shaking his head vigorously no.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it looks like a position with huge potential. I see Nepo just bashed out d5, which I think at least that tries to stir things up a little bit. Makes a lot of sense, I think.
Has been played, did you say?
I think d5 has just
played.
It is.
Yeah, d5 is extremely logical. Yeah,
I think it's very logical.
I quite like this move as well. Yeah, I think this was required.
Yes.
Pretty much.
And after c takes d5, what would be the continuation?
Bishop. Yeah, I don't know. Bishop d6, bishop d7, something along
like
those
that.
lines.
Okay. Yeah.
By the way, I was trying to be humorous there. I judge my audience by the amount of laughter I received when I said that you were shaking your head vigorously. I was being untruthful, Erwin. How do you see the position? Jan has now sacrificed a pawn after bishop takes d5. Full compensation?
No, I agreed with everything that Peter said. Of course, I mean, if white would have gotten a few moves in that position, like knight e2, knight f4, g3, king g2, rook d1, black can just resign probably. So d5 was a must, and yeah, maybe he has enough play, but I would definitely take white. But okay, I'm like you in a way. I like grabbing pawns. So.
Well.
We welcome you to the club, Erwin.
Exactly. We'll make sure you get a gold card.
At the same time, this must be the day of funky king moves, since we have king f1 in Artemyev's game, Karuna's king was on f2, and right now on f3. Can we update the viewers on the position?
Wow.
Yeah, it's curious because we left it somewhere here, and Magnus played knight d7, queen takes b5, queen c7. This is a kind of a typical position where black is seemingly a healthy pawn down, but the knight on e2 is much worse than the knight, which is likely to be on e5 the next move. You often see compensations like this in Grunfeld's. Even there are lines where, in particular, if the black pawn was on b6 and not on a7, opening up the a rook as well to have counterplay against the a4 pawn, those positions are generally just considered to be not better at all for white. But as things stood, after knight e5, Fabi instantly drove that knight away from that excellent square. Knight c4, rook d7 is quite awkward for black because you either have to play a very awkward move, queen c8, or you have to offer a queen trade on b6, which is not that great when you're pawn down. Magnus preferred to play knight g4 check and then knight f6. And Fabi played a very cute move, queen e5, which if black in the position after the queen trade had the move knight d7 available, would obviously be a horrible mistake because you don't really want to be doing this to your structure. But because the only square that I can actually go to is e8 here, and after rook d7, it probably doesn't move again in this game, queen takes e5 wasn't really a playable option for Magnus. He instead played queen e7, and rook d4, rook ac8, rook b1 followed. White is a pawn up here, and I think Magnus will have to play very, very well to defend this position. He still has some compensation, but white stabilized to a very large degree.
I totally agree with you, Peter. And in fact, when I look at this rook on d4, I see it as really very powerful. It defends weaknesses across the fourth rank, but it also controls so many squares. Well, I mean, as we know, Fabi needs to win today. And of course, he is trailing in the match by a game. So now or never kind of situation going on here. Erwin, jumping in here, your take on this position. I mean, it still feels like there is some compensation because the king is on f3, but the king on f3 would only be weak if it was vulnerable. Is it vulnerable?
Yeah, I don't really see a clear continuation here. Knight d7, we go queen d6 probably. We just exchange the queens.
Happily.
I don't see a clear way forward here. Also, white is not completely stable yet. With the king on f3, you always, I guess, have some compensation. White has some weaknesses, c3, a4, but yeah, I'm not sure what. Maybe just rook d8, just make a pass, so to speak.
We've seen rook d8. There was a trade of rooks.
That's already on the board.
Yeah, takes, queen d4, and queen c7. All of this has been played.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, because the white's king side has been slightly opened. It's not a given that you convert this, but it's a pleasant position for Fabi to play. For instance, I think you can move the pawn from c3 to c5 here, but it might get lost there. I think after e5, Black would like to play 95, and you can play c4 using the fact that the back rank is weak. But honestly, I don't like after 97 and knight b6. I think we've probably created issues for ourselves more than anything else. So unsurprisingly, Fabi decides against it. And just in more general terms, I think playing e5, unless it wins you something, is not in Fabi's plans right now, because the knight on f6 is quite passive, and giving it good squares would be very counterproductive. So rook d1 cuts off the knight once again from the d7 square, and after h6, Fabi goes h4, g4, which is quite a striking choice.
Yeah, nice. Some action. Erwin, we have a question for you from our social media, as Anna's been monitoring all of our channels, and you've got a big fan base. Anna.
You do have a big fan base, so I decided I would choose the tweet of your biggest fanboy, Anish Giri, tweeting, "To try and weather the storm, I am sending my best and most diplomatic representative, Erwin Lamy, right into the lion's den, Chess24 broadcast. He's soon publishing his Caro-Kann Chessable Course 2, which is perhaps the second best opening against 1e4, #studychess. Erwin, your thoughts on the Twitter banter, friendly war between Anish and Magnus?
Well, first of all, I think I'm just very happy that Anish always promotes my Chessable courses, so that I don't have to do any promotion myself, basically. So I'm very happy with that. Yeah.
What's his fee? I have a course coming out soon. I need to.
Yeah, no, it's he's been remarkably friendly about the fee, so I'm sure that can be discussed. The question was about the banter between Carlsen and Anish, you mean, or?
Indeed, it does seem like they are having a small Twitter war again. How do you see it as social media interaction? Is this friendly banter? Does he ask for advice from his second on what to tweet?
I'm afraid I'm not a social media second. I tend to stick more to opening variations and stuff like that. No, but I think it's all fun. I think they're both enjoying their to poke at each other, and I think generally it's only been fun.
We are most certainly enjoying their banter,
yes.
And also the Chessable blocks. I think Anish has chosen every single possible moment for saying that 1e6 is the best response to e4. I'm still waiting for him to play it more often, though.
Yeah, that's the thing. With my course, you can at least be sure that I also practice what I preach. So, well, Caro-Kann, I played it my entire life, actually. Sometimes as my main variation, sometimes I just use it occasionally, but it's always been around. Well, what can I say? I'm trying to PR my Caro-Kann here. But I think that it's just a very fun course, and I worked for about 3 months. It was, of course, Corona times, so I had a lot of time to work on it, and I'm actually kind of proud of the results. I really hope that it will be appreciated, and that's all I can say. Yeah.
I've got a question for you on your Caro-Kann course coming up, because I want to ask you how you use the 3700 engine to help you out. In the meanwhile, before we get to that question, Erwin, let's focus on this flank attack. Peter, G4, H4 on Fabi's agenda. Is it serious?
I think it's a very clever idea, because one thing I think was lacking here for White is an active plan to improve his position. And the idea of controlling everything on the G file and then actively driving the action on the king side, planning to go h4 and g5 and drive the knight further away from a reasonably good square on f6, where at least it kind of keeps White honest, keeping an eye on the e4 pawn and preventing White from gaining more space, is very, very clever, I think. And Magnus, after some thought, ends up playing rook e8 here, intending to go e6, e5 next, which is also, I think, a very decent response. Very interesting sequence of two moves here.
Wow, that move, rook e8. I think that would be a move that Jan Hein Donner would call deep. Nice.
But then again, can we pretend we don't understand how deep it is and just go h4 and f takes e?
Okay. Rook takes, I guess.
Yeah, my intention here is to say, okay, now we play my pawn up endgame, and I guess you go king h7, and I go rook d4, rook a8, rook a5. Yeah, rook d4.
Yeah.
And I understand there are definitely drawing tendencies here, at least some drawing tendencies, but we shouldn't be so unhappy about this with white, right?
No, we get the sunny side of the torture, and I know, Erwin, you like the sunny side.
I love this.
Very nice, very nice, very nice.
Queen d6 instead chosen by Fabiano.
Oh, okay. But
allowing both queen b7 and queen c4, to which I assume the reply is rook d4 in both cases.
D4, yes, exactly. Rook d4.
But hang on a second. If I play queen b7 here and you go rook d4, don't I have queen b1, queen h1? He's played queen c4 instead.
Can I take queen d4, Peter, after rook d4, and go f5 afterwards?
Ah, that also was, maybe queen b7, queen b4 was intended, but that feels counterintuitive. Yeah, that's a very important tactic there, knight e4, rook e4, f5, which I completely missed.
Major accident alert.
But queen c4 was chosen instead. And what's the reply after rook d4? Does he intend to go to a2 or?
Maybe queen a2?
Yeah, but that doesn't create a single... maybe knight takes g4. Maybe. Yeah, so after g5, we could maybe even go knight g4 straight away.
Rook d2 though.
Rook d2, knight h2, king g2 though. Yeah, we win the knight. I don't know. It's
so maybe knight g4 wasn't even a threat because you have rook d2 always. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess we just go takes and knight h7 and claim that the knight might get rerouted via good squares. And somewhat surprisingly, Fabi says no to all of that as well. So that I think is a very good indication that queen b4 was coming after queen b7 as well. He goes queen b4 here. But what's the move after? I don't know. This feels like we're misplacing our pieces a little bit.
Yeah, a moment ago, it felt like there was greater cohesion in a white's setup and something maybe not going that great. Briefly, if you will, Erwin, because we've got such a wonderful game ongoing, how did the 3700 Chess Engines AI help you with your chess?
Well, I got the question: what is the most overrated piece of advice? And I think that for a long time, the advice not to use the computer was perhaps a valid one in the 90s when you had only Fritz, and Fritz would point out some obvious tactical errors, but wouldn't really show you any maneuvering, wouldn't show any knowledge of structures, etc. And I just wanted to make the point that I think if you use engines these days in the right way, so in an active way, in an engaging way, where you don't switch off your head and just look at what the engine spits out, but you actually input your own moves and you see what you get in response and sort of use it as a sparring partner, then I think there's a lot to learn because, well, the latest engines out there, the Leelas and the Stockfish, they are so incredibly good and they understand chess to such a degree that I think we would be crazy not to use it. So I think it's mostly an old advice, which I think is no longer applicable to this date.
Thank you for that, Peter.
Yeah, I've been drawing arrows like crazy here because Jan found maybe the most beautiful move of the past couple of days just now.
Wow!
And it's just so nice to look at this position, even from a aesthetic perspective. We left it somewhere around here, and after 92 rook e8, Black clearly has lots of play, but the way the white position collapsed, I feel like Artemiev probably miscalculated something. He played bishop f3, bishop f5, queen f4, queen d7. Of course, Black is not interested in playing any endgames here. And Vladislav, who perhaps was also running slightly short on time, he chose to give up this dark squared bishop. I don't know if not taking on f6 would have made a blind bit of difference, to be honest, but he chose this, which I thought was interesting. because let's say some move like bishop c3 might pick up this rook on a1, but white would be extremely happy to play some kind of position like this. And in general, white is maybe 2 moves away from completely consolidating. But bishop b1 is such a beautiful move by Jan, cutting the rook on a1 from the control over the e1 square. So rook e1 with mate is now a threat. If you take, of course, this runs into queen d3 check and you lose. And stunningly, you can't even play bishop e2, for instance, because after queen d1 check, you still get mated in exactly the same way. Bishop takes d1, rook e1 mate. It feels to me like this is just completely lost. Artemiev ends up playing king g1, knight f1, but after queen d3, for instance, I think he loses pretty much his entire chess set. I don't think you can defend the knight on f1 here, and then the rook on h1 will also fall. So
I think the British have a wonderful expression. That move, bishop b1, was very, very visual move. Bishop b1, our move of the day for sure. What's happening?
Remarkable how it escalated so quickly, because we thought white was actually doing great, right?
Yeah, we thought somewhere like here. I'm pretty sure the computer can find a way in this position to not allow too many threats to materialize. Yeah. It feels unclear to me. I don't know. Maybe we were overstating the case quite perhaps, a bit here.
Yeah. Also thought CD maybe was interesting instead of bishop.
But basically, this is move 15 and this is move 20, and the game is pretty much over, and not the way we expected it to be over. So, a very, very dramatic turnaround. Yeah, and there's been a very big turnaround in the second one as well, where Magnus is no longer pawn down, and if it continues like this, he might start playing for a win for all we know.
Whoa. A moment ago, we thought that Fabi was about to get his grippers on the position. We saw a move rook e8 was maybe a little bit disturbing, but this has gone way out of control. I'm looking at queen h4 and I'm saying Magnus is winning. I mean he's threatening.
Well, I think winning is a little bit too strong, because I think we can play like queen c5 or queen b6 and stop queen f2 check, and then the game still continues. But yeah, Magnus is in control. In particular, let's say queen b6, even the move like knight f6, attacking and then picking up the pawn on e4 probably just wins. And briefly, Artemiev did find a way not to resign on the spot here by playing queen g4 check and rook and bishop e2. But after rook takes e2, for instance, rook takes b1, hoping for queen b1, queen e2. You can play rook g8 here. You can play bishop c5. Bishop c5 probably the cleanest one. And yeah, I think white just resigns here. Because there's just no way to defend against the multiple threats black has.
By the way, just to boldly state the obvious, I think that would be 2.5 points for Jan. Should he win this particular game, that would give him the
set and the match. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. There you go. Set and match. And he would be our first quarterfinalist, and I suspect not very far behind is going to be Magnus, because I'm telling you guys, I'm not feeling it here at all for Fabi.
Also looking at the clock.
Yeah, 19 seconds against a minute and 40, and the position is genuinely very dangerous at the very least. H2 pawn can be picked up with check, and then black could just start running his H pawn down the board. So yeah, just a very, very poor position here for...
well, let's look at that. That looks like a very obvious solution for Magnus. Queen h2 check. Let's say
we go king d3, I guess. We run towards the c2 pawn square, and then we hope to pick up on a5 and get to...
So knight f6 to stop queen e8, perpetual check idea.
Yeah, and now it's a race. I guess it's a race that black is favored in, but at least it's a race.
And indeed, in the meantime, Artemiev resigned against Nepomniachtchi. It's a forced mate at the very end of the game, meaning that Nepomniachtchi moves on to the semifinals, where his opponent will be either Alexander Grishuk or your boy, Erwin Anishgiri.
Erwin, jump in.
Yeah, I think Anish showed that he's very solid this tournament. Hasn't lost a single game, actually. So... I'm confident he's doing well, and it would be nice to see him paired against Nepo soon.
Well, by the way, you mentioned that Erwin, and I really wanted to ask you about it. You said that Anish has been working on his blitz and his rapid chess skills. How do you do that?
Yeah, he's been
Tell us
playing,
some tips,
he's been
please.
playing online a lot. He's been pretty active on the various websites, playing everything that there is to play. Basically, he's playing blitz matches with friends, etc. So he's taking a conscious decision to. Well, I think it's normal because a lot of top events have gone through to faster time controls. So I think you have to make an effort to improve that. It was never his specialty. But it would be nice, of course, if he could simply add it to his repertoire of, and become an expert there as well. So,
well, I assume as a good second, you and Anish engage in a fair round.
Well, actually,
we
recently did actually, but it's very painful because especially when it's online, I used to pride myself in being a decent blitz player online, but I was just being totally annihilated. So I'm afraid he already needs different opponents at this point to spar against. He's faster, he's trickier, he's better. It's very, very painful actually. So I'm not sure I'm eager to play many more matches with him.
Peter's showing a cute little tactic. Just
nice,
for a moment, I wanted to tell the viewers what Peter is doing on the board.
Yeah, I'm having fun there. I enjoy listening. I enjoy listening to Erwin, but it also gives me an opportunity to just have some fun on the demonstration board. And I mean, the issue with knight d1 check is that king c1 is a move you can play. So I think knight g4 is a very kind of a sane and sober decision there by Magnus. It's cleaner this way. But it was a cute tactic, knight d1, nice. King b1, queen b5, forcing probably an immediate resignation out of white. But I like knight g4. There's nothing wrong with knight g4. Knight b3, just establish this knight on f6, and then black has two extra pawns, and they are the two outside passers as well, the h and the a. So there's really not very much going for white here. We might have a very short day again. Amazingly, both of these quarterfinals might go like the entire length of 6 games, which is very surprising. Very surprising considering how generally close in strength everybody is in this tournament.
And I was preparing for a long day, and I come in and things end.
Nice. We've just seen the move Queen E8 check. Fabi's running out of time. He's running out of position. He was down to 5 seconds when he came up with Queen E7. And Magnus instantly, Queen B5, keeping the pressure on. This looks terrible, everyone.
Yeah, I think it's just completely lost. And now A4, A3 probably is the cleanest solution. Just start running one of your passers down the board, because queen takes F7 is not a threat with the queen connected to the knight on C5. And queen E5, A3 is also just completely lost. That pawn will just win the game for Magnus. Yeah, this is now on the board. And even if Fabi didn't have 14 seconds to go with it, it probably would be a dead lost position for white. But as it is, it's both the position and the time, and he has resigned.
Another incredibly accurate move there, just at the very end. I mean, how you don't play A2 is amazing, but I think Queen A4 is just even that more accurate. But fantastic play. Fabiano, earlier, Erwin, I just want to bring you up to date. At the start of play, being objective and neutral, they asked me who was going to win the Chessable Masters, and I said, who are the Americans playing? Yeah, those guys. Fabi looks not like the #2 player in the world in this match. Incredible performance.
Yeah, but it's also, Magnus, if he's in shape, then it's really hard to stop him, and he seems to be in great shape. Actually, these games also today were really good. Really nothing to say. Yeah.
Yeah. What's crazy though, Erwin and Peter, Anna, jump in, is at times you're not even sure he's playing rapid chess. These look like correspondence games, or it's amazing. His accuracy is just fantastic.
Yeah, the quality is stunning, and today he seemed to be very much on his game, and a couple of mistakes from Fabi was perhaps all it took for the match to be over in 3 games.
Well, let's have the man speak for himself. Magnus Carlsen, welcome to the show. Uh-oh, sounds like an audio issue. Magnus, are
wait.
No, everything is working now.
Everything's working. Okay, I will not have to scream again then.
Please don't, but congratulations.
Bravo, well done. Tell us how you did it.
Yeah, I gotta say it was a pretty good, clean day today. In the first game, obviously, I got a comfortable position. I was somewhat better, but I don't think it was enough to win at any point. And then, obviously, in the second game, things went south pretty early for him. And I think after rook d4, he's just pretty much lost. So, obviously, that was a very good start for me.
This is bad. Yeah, there's just no way back from here. Yeah.
No, I think rook d4 is just pretty much over. Like, he has to search for some fairly minuscule chances where I think he loses upon whatever he does. And in the game, I mean, knight d7, knight f5 is kind of the most logical defense, but I think rook g4, rook g6 just wins. And after that, there wasn't that much to be said. Apart from, I think I could have saved myself a bunch of time at one point when I went g3. If I just go bishop c3 instead, I think that's a lot more accurate. I didn't check it, but I was a little bit upset after I played g3 because then I saw bishop c3, and that should be plain sailing from there.
Yeah, that does seem very clean. Yeah.
Yeah, rook f4, g3, rook f3, queen king g2. I don't think there's a lot there. Anyway, the game was winning as well. Then obviously the third game was by far the toughest, and he did find an interesting concept there. When he went for this line with queen c5, queen b5, I didn't believe in that at all for him. I just thought with good development and better pieces, I should be doing well. But I completely underestimated the concept with f4, and that actually made me suffer a bit.
Did you feel you were actually significantly worse at any point, or was it just having to play precisely to keep afloat?
Yeah, I mean, I think with such a safe king and him having so many pawn weaknesses, I think in practical terms I'm still fine. But yeah, I did feel as though he was a little better. But I think in practical terms, it's very hard, and it wouldn't surprise me also if engines on major depth just say that it's more or less equal because white cannot do much.
Yeah, one thing we were wondering during the live show was rook e8. It seems like you've created a threat, but maybe it's just possible to ignore it and play h4 anyway.
Yeah, that was the thing I was the most worried about. I was probably gonna play e5, but I didn't like it.
Yeah, because then you have to play that endgame, which maybe you hold, but it's not. It shouldn't be much fun right after fe5 and.
Yeah, queen e5, he takes, and
we can
include rook e5, but I don't think it matters.
I think it's the same position, yeah.
Yeah, and king h7 and probably rook d4 exactly. Here I would. I wasn't so sure actually. G5, I guess he goes h5 most of the time. Still.
And then maybe rook c5 and maybe
rook c5. It still feels like it's within, but still there's c4. Then knight g3 is a threat. I mean, this was the one point where I didn't really didn't really like my position very much. But probably there is some more accurate way to play, but I didn't particularly find it.
And yeah, and once you got the rook d8 move in, it feels
yeah,
like
rook d8, I'm out of danger, and he tries to win, and with such disparity in piece activity and king safety, I mean, trying to win this is almost always going to be equivalent to a loss. But I guess after rook d8 is a little worse.
Magnus, we have a question from our social media for you. Anna will bridge the gap. Anna.
Thank you, Yasser. We did have many questions for Magnus, but I have selected one which is a double question from Keinmerk. Magnus, how do you feel about rapid chess versus classical chess? And do you see chess becoming an e-sport? If you could answer those questions separately.
Yeah, sure. Well, these days I'm playing a lot of rapid chess. I don't know. I've sort of always found rapid chess the most difficult because it's such a tricky hybrid between classical and blitz chess. And there's almost always going to be two phases of the game, one classical phase and one blitz phase, and to balance them, it's very, very hard. But I think it's also a very entertaining form of play, and even though I find it difficult, I still enjoy it both as a spectator, but also as a player. And in terms of chess becoming an esport, I think never fully, like, or exclusively an esport, but I think it's part of the direction where chess is going, that more of the activity is going to be online, and I don't mind it, to be fair.
Thank you for your insights and answers. The rest of the questions are all related to Anish Giri. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but Erwin is here with us. Erwin Dami II of Anish Giri has joined us for this round. Any thoughts on the recent Twitter banter, Magnus?
I think the tweets speak for themselves both ways. But having said that, I wish Anish good luck, and I reiterate my wish to see him in the finals.
Ooh,
Thank you for your words, and now the ball is on Anish's side, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, Erwin is here to represent Anish's interest in any contractual matters. Erwin, do you agree that Anish would be satisfied to reach the finals?
I think that is. I think we can settle that right here, right now. I think he's ready.
All right, that's very, very nice. Other questions, Anna, for Magnus, as he made a very convincing statement that he is a semi-finalist.
I think also the questions were involving Anish, and the comment from Mr. Dodgy was a guess, simply whether Magnus is wearing long pants or shorts. So this is about the level of the conversation right now.
Got it. We won't go there. We'll leave that.
We can keep that a secret.
Magnus, we have another semi-finalist, Nepo. He also won in very convincing style against the winner of the preliminary group. Does that result surprise you? And just a comment on Nepo's play.
Well, technically, I won the preliminary group, right?
Oh, okay.
No, I obviously Artemiev is strong, but I always believed that Jan could do well there, and I'm happy for him. He's struggled quite a bit in these online events, and now whoever he faces in the semis, he will not be an underdog. So he has a very good chance.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Have
for
you
that.
seen Bishop B1, Magnus?
No, I haven't. What's the story?
You will have a moment of pure joy then when you get. I guess I can bring it up on this board actually. In this position, Jan played Bishop F5 B1. If you can see it on your screen, which is that is a nice move.
Yeah, that is nice.
That is a nice move to look at.
But I think if you would pick one player in the field to actually find this move, it would be Jan. So
yeah, I think we can trust on him on that. But still, it's when I saw that, I got briefly very excited.
Well, if you follow up, Peter, you go Bishop B1 for a moment. The one that I really liked was Bishop E2, the answer to Bishop E2. That, yeah, baby, Queen, yeah, and Rook E1 checkmate. That's extra special. The whole Bishop E1 concept, very impressive. Look great. Thrilled us, Magnus. Well, okay. Guys, another short day for us at the office. Magnus, I want to thank you very much for joining us. That was very gracious of you. Erwin, fantastic with your chess course. Again, you get a big discount by purchasing Erwin's Chessable course. And any final thoughts that you'd like to share, Peter?
Not what I expected to see today. To be entirely honest, I thought that one set, in particular in the Magnus match, ending in 3 games, was already unusual. But 2 would have been a long shot. But yeah, very, very convincing play by the world champion both days. And Jan's victory today, I think, was in very different to day 1, where I think events slightly conspired in his favor. Today he was just a better player, and a very deserved winner as well. And tomorrow, of course, we'll have 2 Armageddons, because we never get 2 of these days in a row.
Exactly. We'll get the flip side tomorrow. We'll be back for matches C and D, tomorrow's 4th game. But before we leave, we have another learning moment that we would like to share with you. Anna, take it away, please.
I believe it's going to be the honor of our guest, our author of the day, Erwin Lamy. Erwin, I will need to put you on the spot and ask you which moment was your favorite of the day. What would you choose as learning moment of today's round, all of the games included?
Okay, I thought game 1 between Fabiano and Magnus, that was one interesting moment. I thought in general, I think that with Fabi playing this Bishop D2, Nimzo playing for a small advantage, and then he actually got a little bit worried. If we go to move 14, I believe it was, after knight takes c5, DC knight takes c5. I thought this was an interesting moment. Yeah, this position which we have on the board now. Because after queen c2, black played queen a6, and bishop c3 followed, knight fe4. And to me, it was quite remarkable how quickly white, from a seemingly safe position, actually got into a very bad position. I don't know if it was lost at any point, but it was very much on the edge, I think, at some point. And instead of going to c2 on move 15, I think an interesting way to play here would be queen to b5. So you prevent the queen from going to a6. And if black now plays a move like knight fe4, let's say, you just go knight ed4, and next up is rook c2, rook fc1. Queen can indeed go back to e2, perhaps even bishop e1 is also a move. And this is, I think, the type of game that Fabiano was actually aiming for. Here he can play for some small advantage and see whatever comes up. Yeah, I thought it was interesting to see those small differences. Going back to c2 actually landed him in a bit of trouble. And I think after queen b5, he could still be actually hoping to get the type of game that he was aiming for. It was not a huge moment, perhaps, but I thought it's interesting to see how these small details, they actually changed the entire course of the game. Because after queen c2, yeah, it was just a long way of suffering for for white, basically.
Yeah, and also I wanted to add to that in a more general sense, in these isolani positions, you want to restrict the black counterplay as much as possible, and black does need to sort of, there are two modes of games you get in structures like this. The kind of a game Magnus got, where he got a lot of free piece play using the rooks on e8 and c8. If you just look at this position, every single piece black has, and on a perfect square, there is knight d3 ideas, knight a4 ideas. The queen on a6 is, as Erwin was describing, very active. The rooks are on perfect open and semi-open files. Or if that doesn't materialize and white controls this type of counterplay, black often has to defend for like 50 moves with zero counterplay and really zero joy out of life. And often it is those very, very little, seemingly very little decisions that that make the difference. And I think Fabi played Queen C2 more or less instantaneously as well. So perhaps it's a rare case of an extremely strong player missing a pivotal moment where he should have spent some time figuring out what his options are and what the pros and cons are.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, in the second game, if I may, I had one more question there. In the technical phase, at the moment he went e3, e4, Magnus. If you could just bring that up. I'm a big fan of exchange sacrifices myself, and I was extremely drawn to rook gg7 here. And after king f8, well, bishop d4, actually, I think you go rook c8, rook c2. Maybe it's not so simple, but you can start with rook h7 here, which is probably also a very clean way of finishing things off, because rook h8 is a huge threat. And you probably have to go rook, and now you go bishop d4, and h5 is hanging, and well, it's just completely.
Yeah, that is a nice.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can say that this is better than what Magnus did, because I think e4 was fine, but it's just a matter of taste, perhaps, and I like to give exchanges, so that's why I thought this.
Yeah, that's a nice idea. I think I missed rook h7 when we were looking at this, and also we were very fixated.
Detail,
yeah, we were very fixated on the idea of playing e4 because it does appear to be close to completely winning.
Yeah, but then later on, it did look like he was still fighting, or well, maybe I'm wrong actually, but.
That was the rook takes f6, rook f6.
Yeah.
He did get into a single rook ending, but it really felt like Fabi was not only material down, but really on the back foot. Anna, I want to just get you in here as we're getting ready to close the show to inform people about what is happening in banter chess. Anna.
Very important question indeed, Yasser, since we do have every single evening a Banter Blitz show for you by the Chessable Masters, and today it is the one and only Fabiano Caruana. He may have lost his match today, and he may be not with us, unfortunately, from tomorrow on. Magnus Carlsen moves on to the semifinals. Fabiano will not be playing against the rest of the Chessable Masters, but he will be playing against Chess24 premium members tonight at 8 p.m. Central European time. So take your chance to challenge the world number 2 for a game on Chess24. And as you can see, the calendar features some really high-profile names. Tomorrow, it will be Magnus Carlsen's turn to take challenges on Chess24.
Thank you for that. And as we close the show, I'd again like to thank our Grandmaster Erwin Lamy for joining us, pointing out those two very nice pivotal moments. I especially like the first learning moment, Erwin. You can get Erwin's course at a 46% discount. Order today. And Erwin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much, Erwin, and you definitely are the best representative of Anish.
No question about that. Final thoughts, Peter, as we close the show.
I'm all out of final thoughts. I'm very excited for tomorrow. I am somewhat grateful for the shorter days, but it doesn't feel quite right without the Blitz and the Armageddon. And so far, those days clearly alternated. So I'm expecting some of that tomorrow.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Everybody, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of our broadcast, for supporting our streams, for being here. Tell your friends where you're hanging out. and become a premium member. Get involved in the Banner Blitz and support wonderful authors like Erwin Me. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow for the next day of quarterfinals matches. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
There are more moves in chess than atoms in the universe. But only one move ends the game.
My name is John Bartholomew, and this is the Checkmate Patterns Manual.